Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome back to debate review night
Hi.
or day or what have you.
Great. Sure. Sure. Why not? Why not?
I keep
Indeterminate
trying to be
period of
more
time.
inclusive with my language, and I keep
I
saying
know you
something
don't
that
have
doesn't
to
apply to Mark.
be. You don't have to. It's fine. Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's totally. I just pretend it's nighttime here. I just go, yeah, yeah. Why it's so bright? Who knows? Could be any reason. Let's just pretend a street lamp is exactly like right outside my window. How about that? There you go. There you go.
I mean, I do have street lamps outside my window. That's one of the reasons I have these. You know what? You guys can't see them, but I've got big freaking towels over my windows. Not that it helps when the sun comes out; it just goes right through. But it's not important anyway.
Eh.
I'm on so much medicine, folks.
Oh no.
Okay, today we're doing part 3 of Alex O'Connor versus Francis Collins. It's not really so much a versus; they're having more of a guided discussion sort of thing.
Discussion. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating discussion. We've had enough to talk about that we need a third part, so there's that.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that O'Connor's been very gentle with Collins here. Like he's being very sort of, yeah, okay, but here's my problem with that. I'm not averse to it. It's fine. I just find that Francis Collins just doesn't connect the dots much. He sort of has these beliefs, but he doesn't really connect them up. He doesn't really give reasons why he believes them, which I find odd.
it's hmm. I don't know. I've been doing digging and research and stuff, getting ready for future shows, and so I've got Aquinas on the brain today, and it's
Oh,
it's contaminating my perspective. I'm like, the entire Christian apologetics enterprise is built on reasoning backwards, so of course they're not
right.
connected.
Yeah.
Eh.
Eh.
Say lovey. So they've been the links to the first 2 parts are, of course, in the description if you want to go back and watch those, which, you may enjoy. So consider doing that once on Mark's channel and once here, because we do these every other week. So make sure you're subscribed to both channels. Next week, we'll be back over at Mark's. But mostly they've been focusing on, well, as is often the case, philosophy stuff. Although they did spend quite a bit of time on the design argument. In fact, they may still be there. I can't
Yeah.
remember quite where we left off.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I should have figured it out, but I didn't. I didn't.
Is that right? We'll pick it up when we pick it up. It's just you know.
Sure. Sure.
Adventures. Oh goodness, we're getting critiques. So other Mark says reasoning is a bit of a stretch. Backwards is accurate though. Ass
Mhm.
backwards.
Yeah.
Jin says, say it correctly, Emperor. Reasoning poorly backward. I mean, I don't like to clutter my sentences with unnecessarily fuck. That word fell right out of my mouth. Efflur I'm not unnecessary words. Mhm.
Effluviant, effervescent,
I may have been trying to combine the two.
a fucked up. I don't know what you're talking about. Look, I think that reasoning backwards is poorly in and of itself. I think it's a bit superfluous to say reasoning backward poorly because reasoning backwards is always poor. But that's okay. That's all right. Let's
Yeah,
get some. It's kind of redundant.
for sure. It surely is. It makes me think of shoot. It was a Dennis E. Taylor novel. He's a sci-fi author. One of his Babaverse books. He has this. I'll skip the story. There's an alien species, and they have a word, and the aliens have to explain the word to the human intelligence that they meet, and basically it means critters with broken brains. But I wish I can't remember the word because it's in an alien language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there was a book written by, I think it was, I can't remember what it was. It was a book written with word town names as and they defined them kind of things. So they made up definitions with town names on them. So I
Okay.
remember Grimander, which is a town in Germany. They gave the definition. It was done by um, sort of, I think it was Douglas Adams. But they gave that as a definition of Grimander is the rate at which the traffic flows when everybody is stuck, but like unwilling to overtake a cop car, and that is so funny. Like you know,
The struggles are real. Do
yeah,
people do
yeah,
that in Australia too, where they'll just all drive super slow just to not pass a police car?
right, right. Yeah, no, it was Douglas Adams and John Lloyd in 1983, Meaning of Life. And it like I just remember that a town in my state called Fremantle, they defined that as like to steal something of little or no value. And I thought that was just awesome. That's a great word. Fremantle. Like I fremantled a pen, you know.
I love verbification.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I kind of want the whole glossary of that kind
Uh,
of stuff.
Here we go. Plymouth, to relate an amusing story to someone without remembering that it was they who told it to you in the first place.
That happens so
Right.
often.
Right.
Although the reverse happens sometimes too. For instance, you just the other day were telling a story that I told you like 2 years ago. And not
Yeah.
only did you nail the story, you remembered I was the one who told it to you. I'm like, holy shit, Mark's memory is scary.
No, but now I can't remember what it was. That's the thing about it. Now I can't remember what it was because I'm not like I don't need that information anymore, so it's lost to me. So I don't like when Lynn said I told Lynn that and she goes, "Well, what was it about?" And I'm like, "I don't remember." And that's why it's so.
It was the missionary and the Inuit person.
Oh yes, yeah, no, yeah. So when I need these things to like explain something, but when someone says, "Well, what was it?" I'm like, I have no idea, and it was just before. So yeah, it's a paradox. It's a don't even ask. Don't
Oh,
even
I
ask.
get it. My memory is very like I hate it when people say, "Tell me about yourself," because my memory works in a similar way. It's needs based. I need a stimulus to
Right,
react to recall things.
right.
You know. Mark says at least one Mark has a good memory. I mean, we spread it around. We all have our pluses, pluses and let's start the video.
So okay, we've got this like apocalyptic Jesus. So there are things that I think we can be more confident about, and things I think we can be less confident about. Where does Jesus claim in his own words to be God? In John's Gospel, before Abraham was, I am, right? In invoking the godly name, that only appears in John's Gospel, the theological Gospel. It doesn't appear in any of the other Gospels. Now, does that mean that we can think it didn't happen? Well, maybe not. Like it would be an argument from silence to say that the other sources don't mention it. But it does seem strange that if Jesus did actually just explicitly say at one point that he's God, that the other gospel writers.
No, it's
Yeah,
worth noting because this comes up a lot in counter apologetics. The argument from silence, the fact that the book doesn't say a thing doesn't mean the thing didn't happen, just that it didn't get written
right,
down. However, like most fallacies, the fact that there is a fallacy there doesn't mean the contrary position is automatically true
correct.
either. Just
Hmm.
because you can say argument from silence doesn't mean that it did happen and just no one wrote it down.
Right. Or alternatively, it just didn't happen. But yeah, the
Yes.
argument that it wasn't written down doesn't automatically mean it didn't happen.
Yep. And so that brings us to the default position of we have no reason to think it happened until
Right.
you show us it did, you know?
Correct. Yes. That is the default position. Yes.
Ay, ay, ay. And Dade is admiring the decor. I've been looking at the pictures on the walls as the camera changes perspective.
Just sort of didn't think that it was relevant to include in their stories.
But what do you? So you think you?
And so because it only appears in one source, in other words, I think that's another reason to think that it's less
Sure.
likely to happen.
So you believe Jesus was a real person? He was crucified. What is your interpretation of the events afterwards? What do you believe?
Sure. So the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is to say, like, well, what can we know actually happened? Well, it seems that Jesus was crucified, and then what do our sources say about the resurrection? Well, Mark's gospel, the earliest manuscripts don't have the end of Mark's gospel. There's a longer ending of Mark, which isn't in the earliest
Correct.
manuscript. So the earliest.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring this up all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, that the long end, and you know, I learnt this from Bart Ehrman watching his videos, that you know, we used to think that Mark ended at 20. You know, I think it's Mark, is it Mark 16? Mark 19? I can't remember which one it is. Anyway,
16:8. Shit, it's been a minute. I want to say 16:8, but maybe it's 8.
16. Yeah, no, it's 16. It's 16.
Okay.
So everywhere from 9 to 20, like we used to think that was Mark's gospel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it used to be that was Mark's gospel, and then we found manuscripts, that earlier manuscripts that don't have it in it. You know, I've said that to a person once, and they've said, no, that was a corrupted version. And it's like, are you joking right now? Like, so it only started appearing at a certain point, but you think that is, how is that possible? I don't know. It's wild.
It's such a fascinating mystery that we're hoping our Bible scholars or our anthropologists or whatever can find an answer to, because one of the arguments we've been getting from Christians all these centuries is it would be impossible for someone to insert stuff. It has to be true, because the first person who tries to insert stuff will get caught by everybody else who doesn't have an altered copy. And yet, not only do we see copying errors like crazy, whatever, errors are errors, we can forgive those. But there is stuff like that, like these deliberate insertions that do not match everybody else's copies. And yet they not only spread, but eventually replaced a couple generations down the line. Someone went, oh, there's more Mark. Let's add it into our book, so it's the most complete.
Mm-hmm.
Or something. We don't know, but it's, how did that happen? I hope we get to find out. It might tell us a lot about how all religions work, potentially.
Account that we have of Jesus, or rather a sort of biographical account, because Paul's letters are earlier than that, but a biographical account. The earliest biographical account we have is Mark. And the earliest versions of Mark don't contain any post-resurrection appearances at all. The story ends with the woman coming to the tomb, and the tomb is empty, but that's where it ends.
That's an interesting thing, completely unrelated to the debate, but often we point out that Paul doesn't mention the empty tomb, and that's telling, because these biographical-ish stories are all about the empty tomb and the resurrection and whatnot. But the fact that there's no mention of empty tomb by Paul means that if one is fabricated, it's the gospel stories. It's the stories of the empty tomb and the resurrection. But the fact that there's no post-resurrection appearances in Mark, if that did happen after Paul, when Paul's talking, like, they would have known there already were post-resurrection appearances. It's almost like it was a deliberately constructed prequel. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just rubs me the wrong way, because I'm like, whichever one came first, or whichever one came last, they knew about the other one. So why not mention the stuff that's in that story?
Yep. Can you give me 1 second? Sorry, I've just got to grab some water. Sorry, Amber. Just be 1 second.
Oh, sure. It's super important to grab some water. And as it happens, we have a break that's 1 minute long just for that. Hey folks, I've been working hard on my health, and so far I've lost over 140 pounds. A huge part of good health is hydration. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with Epic Water Filters. Check this out. Not only can you say goodbye to expensive bottled water, but these filters are made in the US, so no tariffs, and they're made to fit your life. From these lovely pitchers I can fill from, to sink units, to portable filters that fit in your reusable bottle. With Epic, I can refill from nature's water sources and not have to worry about bacteria and whatnot. But also, send back a used filter to be responsibly recycled, and they'll send you a free replacement, saving you and the earth even more. Want to save a ton of money, be healthier, and build a better world? Head to epicwaterfilters.com and enter code EMBER15 at checkout for 15% off. Don't settle for random water. Upgrade to Epic. It's such a
Epic,
cheesy
yeah.
ad.
Mhm.
I don't know. It does the
Hydrate.
job.
Yeah, hydrate,
Yeah.
people.
Hydrate. But also, it does remind me, I don't normally play that ad on this show. That's for the weekday show. It was just funny to put it right there. But
Sure.
based on my relationship with that company, how I'm kind of like a mini sponsorship situation, I'm trying to institute sort of a micro sponsorship sort of thing with those the pride flags, the space pride flags I've been working
Yep.
on for the last month or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody's interested in shilling my stuff for their own financial gain, hit me up. All right. I forget where we were again.
We're talking
And-
about the long ending of Mark.
All right. Mark says, Mark set you up for that perfect segue and you fumble it. I nailed that and you know it.
As the sources get later, so we get Matthew and Luke and John, the witnesses increase and the stories become more fanciful and theological. So then you in Matthew, you get the appearance to the disciples. In Luke, you get the road to Emmaus, which is further. In John, it's only in John that you get the stories like Doubting Thomas, where he's so the later the source is, it seems like the more witnesses we have, and the more fanciful and theological the story gets. And so again, hypotheses. Did this really happen? And it just so happens that the later the source, the more detailed they become. Or is it the case that this was a mythological development that happened after Jesus died, and that's why the later the source is written, the more mythological and the more convoluted these appearances become? It seems to me better.
It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I realize Alex is presenting a much more nuanced view than we normally get from the other side of the discussion, but it's still a black and white fallacy. It doesn't have to be mythological or like you could have real events hypothetically that Paul reported on, and then somebody writes a biography later to be the prequel for what Paul said, and then the next person, Matthew, comes along and is like, there's plot holes, I'm gonna fix them, and so we get the fish story starts growing. It can be a real thing and still become mythologized. Like the vast majority of Celtic myths are based on real people to the best of our ability to determine. The difference with Celtic myths is they include that they were real people at one point and grew to become gods and heroes over time. It's part of the myth.
Obviously there's some absolutely real things in the Bible, like for instance, the places, some of the, we know that Pontius Pilate was the overseer of that area. We absolutely know that because we found coins and documents and stuff with his name on it. We know that that's the case, but that doesn't make any of the surrounding events 100% true. Just because somebody writes about Jerusalem or Bethlehem or any of these towns that did actually exist doesn't make the events true. So I think it's not, and there's texts floating around that we know are just bullshit stories. Like even fervent Christians will go, they're bullshit. The infancy gospel of Thomas, where Jesus is fighting dragons and striking kids down dead, kind of thing, for reasons. We know that is absolute nonsense, and even the most fervent Christian will go, no, that's made up stories. Well, yeah. So it isn't, to my mind, it isn't really like the whole mythicist question, was Jesus a myth? It's not really the important part. The important, like, to my mind, all sort of people agree that some stories about Jesus are made up. Just depends on which story, where you put that line of which stories are made up and which aren't. You know, and to my mind, I would just put it as, yeah, he was probably a rabbi, probably had a following, you know, called Yeshua, probably had a following. You know, I'm not going to die on that hill. If someone can demonstrate it didn't exist, fine, that's fine. But, you know, what else is true? Probably nothing. You know, all of these miracles, all of this supernaturals are probably none of that. You know, he was probably billed to be a lot more popular than he actually was. You know, did he you know, tip over tables in the temple? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't seem very likely at all.
I mean, that part at least is possible. Like there are
Yeah.
disruptive people at some points in history and whatnot. But yeah, like the witnesses, right? Like Paul tells us 500 witnesses. Luke tells us like 170. Like
Mhm.
we're just I don't even know if these people knew how to count. But we also fish story. We get like the first fish story, right? Like Jesus fed the 5,000 with loaves and fishes. Well, in the original version of the story, maybe it was he fed 50, or maybe it was 5. And because, you
Yeah.
know, for some reason, translation from Aramaic to Greek, they like to add on zeros. I don't know. It's more fun that way.
Explained by that methodological development, especially considering that even the earliest gospel was already written decades after the death of Christ.
And the fact that all of the disciples went to their deaths except for John, proclaiming this, and were martyred as a result.
How do we know that?
Thank you, Alex, because
Yes,
that's the second
thanks,
time
Alex.
you said that. And that's not,
Yeah.
we don't know that that's why. Like,
Right.
oh, it's infuriating. But I'm sure Alex will address it.
By the descriptions we have.
So I'm genuinely asking, by the way, because I'm not sure about this. Again, I'm also not a historian. I'm just
Neither am I.
an atheist YouTuber, right? Like, and by the way, that's one of the things that I love about these conversations, and why I've so liked doing podcasts and having people like William Lane Craig and Bart Ehrman on, because unlike previously where I'd make a video essay, did Jesus rise from the dead, or I do a debate, you kind of have to have the argument and the point where I can sit down with these guys and be like, but hold on, like Bart, like how do you explain what happened then, you know, or like with
Tom Wright, that would be fun. I'd pay.
I'd love to have
to have that one happen.
Have Dr. Wright on the show. But yeah, so the disciples going to their death. Like I think the Gospels record the death of 2 of the disciples, if I'm not mistaken. You've got Judas' suicide and one more, I think. But in other words, I actually don't know how, like, historically.
Well, it depends which gospel you read for Judas, because in one he's hanged and the other he
Yeah.
bursts open like an overripe fruit. So
And
like both
does
of
that
those
count as murdered?
well, when God doesn't murder anybody, come on now, what are you talking about? But like when you point out both of them can't be true, like that he can't have tripped, fallen over, and burst open, you know, his innards spilling everywhere, and he hung himself. That both of those can't be true. And then you get these apologetics like, oh well, both could have happened. He could have hanged himself and then somehow tripped and fall. And it's like, oh, come on now. Let's be serious about this. Like, if you're recording somebody's death, you're not going to record, you know, what happened after they hung themselves. Like, come on now, this is ridiculous. Just ludicrous.
Absolutely. And the other one, I believe, is Peter with the whole upside down crucifixion thing. And even in his story, if I recall correctly, he doesn't get offered a chance to recant. They just kill him, you know?
Yeah.
Accepted it is that the disciples went to their death for their beliefs, and it may very well be.
But a lot of it goes back to like tradition, church tradition, stuff like that, and then even cross-referencing. So William and Craig, what he goes back to is Paul's statement.
Yeah. They just hand wave it away and say church tradition, which apparently makes it just as good as gospel. But here's the thing: to a believer, it is the evidentiary standard of we have it written down. It is literally gospel. Versus, well, it's just tradition. We just believe it because we believe it. Same level of evidentiary standard. which tells you a lot about the quality of information in the scriptures.
Yep.
Statement, I think in 1 Corinthians about the creed that was established, what she says is within 5 years of Jesus's death or something like that. And then Paul's established all the main facts of the resurrection. And that he points to at least as something that is proof of this.
Well, no, Paul doesn't give us the main fact of the resurrection, because, I mean, depends on what you mean by the main fact. If we're going to go by Gary Habermas's minimal facts, Paul only gives us one fact: resurrection. All the other stuff, the empty tomb and the 3 days and all this shit, nope.
Yep.
Not a bit of it. You know, Paul is, he may as well be telling ghost stories, because he gives us nothing about Jesus's life.
Well, he never met Jesus while he was alive.
But
that's the thing to remember.
He's in communion with the divine spirits, having truth revealed to him, and he knows nothing of the guy's life.
Right. But like, that's what people forget, that Paul's accounts and his letters are the earliest writings we have about Jesus from a man that never met Jesus. Right, like he is a man who did never met the dude, and all the others. Think about it: 40 to 50 years later, that is a significant amount of time. Especially when, you know, think about all of the problems we have knowing what somebody did, 40 to 50 years ago, and how their life is sort of glorified. If you know, they like Elvis or whatever. Like 40 to 50 years ago, in a time when there was no video cameras, no photographs, no anything, can you imagine how the story must grow? You know, like Jesus, some people think that Jesus is an angel or still alive or an alien and things like that. Can you imagine what it would be like in that time, where you have let's face it, a cult leader of a doomsday cult who dies, and then their followers write it down 40 to 50 years later.
It's pretty nutty. But it's okay, because there's tangents. People come here for the tangents, as all the world knows. And our dear Jess has sent us a super chat for 5 superior northern-ended dollars. I want to do that alleged dollars joke, but Canadian dollars are worth more than ours now. So we have the
really?
I don't know exactly. I know ours have lost 30% of their value in the last year, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
which is actually right.
But the Dow, it's over $2,000. The Dow. But the Dow.
It was back under like the next day. It's wild. USD to Canada. Let's see. It says $1 is worth $1.37 Canadian. So for the moment, ours are slightly more valuable still. For now.
Yeah.
Anyway, tangent upon tangent. Jess asks, I cannot say words today, folks. Paleo-ethnobotanical studies.
Yeah.
Epipaleolithics, like flint napping. Ooh, flint napping is a sick, useful skill, especially if you ever go time traveling. Help Jess decide what to take in university. Also, hi, you two rock. Tangent. Hell yeah. It sounds like you've got rocks going on. You're thinking flint napping. You're thinking of what was it? Paleo-ethnobotanical studies. That just sounds fun to say. You know, once you can actually get your tongue to pronounce the syllables. I don't know. So Jess has been pondering going back to school, but she needs a major. And it's definitely going to be something history, paleontology, possibly dinosaur flavored. Suggestions. Let us know in the chat. Help Jess pick her favorite thing. It should definitely be something that you feel excited about, because it is a lot of work, especially if you're going to go chasing down a master's. it has to be something that sparks joy, as Marie Kondo would put it, because otherwise it's gonna suck. Just my suggestion, though.
Entire thing actually taking place, corroborated with other.
Yeah, so Paul's in, this is it gets really interesting,
Yeah,
right? Because there's so much to unpack here, because people will say, okay, Alex, you've said that as the stories go on, the stories become more fanciful and the resurrection becomes sort of more of a cemented thing. But what about Paul? Because Paul is earlier than the Gospels, and Paul writes about like 500 people, witnessing Jesus, and Paul seems to believe in the resurrection. Yes, but Paul is not an eyewitness to the resurrection. No. Right? I don't think the Gospels are written by eyewitnesses either, but like a lot of Christians believe that they were. And so
technically it says in Damascus he was an
so
eyewitness.
he witnesses the risen Christ in a very particular kind of way. He's not witnessing a bodily resurrection of Christ, which is the kind of thing we're trying to establish right now.
Yeah.
And so like I can totally imagine that Paul believed in a resurrected Jesus, and that he really did see a big blinding flash of light on the road to Damascus, and that convinced him of Jesus' existence. He did not meet a physically resurrected human being that he'd spent years traveling with and was able to sort of look at and interact with.
Well, not even the years traveling with, but like the fact he didn't meet a physically resurrected Jesus, when the Gospels tell us there's a physically resurrected Jesus. Why? I realized later on they added on the whole he ascended into heaven to kind of like cross-link it to the magical glowing light thing, but it's frustrating. I don't know.
It's also weird that sort of it's a bodily resurrection, like that Jesus did 3 days of decomposition and then he's back in his body because the body was gone, kind of thing. So did he take the body up to heaven? Like, where was the body? Like, when he went back to heaven, did he exit? Like, there's a lot of questions there, right? Because he sort of ascended to heaven again, presumably took his body with him. Why?
Put it in storage.
Presumably it
so
is
he can
cold up
install
there.
the sword that he'll be like breathing when he comes again, or whatever the story said.
I don't know. It's really, really weird.
It is. It's New Testament eschatology does not match what the Jewish prophets predicted. That's another whole layer of conflict. But it's just kind of like somebody was just making up loose ends. They're like, people go, well, okay, he resurrected. Where's his body? Well, he like dissolved the old body and constituted a new one, and that's why nobody recognized him. Okay, cool. And then where is he now? Well, he ascended into heaven, which is why Paul only saw a light. Okay, so where's his body? Well, he took it with him. You know what? That's what happened. He took it with him. Yep.
Sure.
It just has that ring to it.
Yeah.
Turns out you can take it with you. Sort of.
Sort of.
And thrust the hand into the wound to make sure it was him. And so it seemed much more plausible to me that Paul could have been mistaken than that like a disciple who thought he saw a physically resurrected Jesus who he'd spent years with could be mistaken. Paul is the earlier source, sure, but he's also the less reliable source because he wasn't an eyewitness for that reason.
Again, your prior is to be suspicious of his conclusion.
But you talked about in your...
You're a scientist, Francis. You're supposed to be skeptical.
Yeah. Well, I think that sort of you really should be skeptical of supernatural claims. And what gets me is the intellectual inconsistency, because they're skeptical of, say, Muslim supernatural claims, right? Like, Muhammad sliced the moon in half. They're like, well, I'm skeptical. It's not enough to dismiss it with, well, that's your prior. I think that Collins doesn't understand what priors kind of are. Like, he's sort of saying, hey, it's your prior not to believe this at its face value. And that's not really a prior. Like, it's sort of being rational means that you should have a skepticism for anything that sort of does not fall within your ordinary experience, right? Like, so unless you've seen a resurrection, the prior should be that resurrection claims you should be skeptical of them, because out of the trillions of deaths we've been aware of, none of them have risen from the dead after 3 days, right? So that is not, that isn't really a prior, or rather it is a prior that is reasonable to take resurrection claims as sort of, you would need strong evidence to show that that is the case. And you're right, a scientist should understand this. That when somebody says, hey, all of the, what is he, a biologist, geneticist?
Yeah.
Sure. All of the information says that, birds build nests kind of thing, or a certain bird builds nests, and someone claims that they saw one dig underground in a burrow. And you would meet that, you wouldn't say, well, your prior is not to believe that. It's like, no, based upon the available evidence, people don't rise from the dead. Like, it's weird. It's very strange.
It'd be a neat trick if it did, but although we may have solved that problem. How there's a passage in the Bible apparently somewhere that it's the one the Jehovah's Witnesses rely upon for when occasionally they don't allow transfusions. Sometimes they turn it off, sometimes they turn it.
Yes.
They go back and forth on transfusions, but when they ban
Yeah,
transfusions, they use this passage that one who dies for want of blood will automatically get a free pass to heaven. Obviously, that's an exact verbatim quote. But thinking about that, a person who perishes for want of blood will be saved and will have their life preserved and so forth. Vampires. I've been saying for ages, we don't see these people with eternal life who will not taste death that Jesus promised. But what if we misunderstood the promise? What if it's vampires?
Well, maybe vampires are going around sending people to heaven because, like if they drink somebody's blood and exsanguinate them, then the person dies from want of blood, right? So maybe in fact, vampires are angels going around sending people to heaven, giving them a free pass, as it were, giving them a Willy Wonka golden ticket or whatever to heaven. You ever thought about that? Checkmate, atheists.
That's right. We have to convert now to the Church of the Angelic Vampire or something. We'll probably end up worshiping Brie.
Hey, I mean, most Christians have a blood obsession anyway. Like, have you heard them talk? Like, wash away the sins with the blood of the... It's like, dude, come on now.
And Seth Andrews does a great video about, I mean, we've all talked about it at length, but Seth Andrews' video is quite entertaining. It's actually a speech he gave at one of the events he attended about how Christianity, I think it's actually just called Christianity is a Blood Cult or something very much like that.
Yeah.
It's amusing. And to tangent again, Mark brings up another amusing thing that Guts have given is while her primatology stuff is fascinating. I can listen to her talk about the bones of Homo naledi for literally 4 hours, because I did for 4 hours once. But she's best known for talking about the heat problem. And I mention that because I just want to reiterate to Ken Ham, because I know you're listening, Ken, I do have a solution for the heat problem, and I will sell it to you for however much it costs to solve world hunger. That offer's still on the table.
Most recent book, you talked about cognitive bias a lot, and I think we do default. Like whatever your worldview is, I think you default to that. Doesn't matter if you're Christian, if you're not a Christian.
And can I just say as well, like with Fun Tuning thing, like something very weird happened on Easter morning, right? Like something very strange happened at this point in history, and even if you're just trying to socialize,
I mean, assuming something did happen, which we can't, because Paul doesn't talk about it. None of the contemporary historians talk about it. Like, nobody mentions anything happening that particular day. And also, it would have been Passover at the time. It wasn't Easter until the Roman Church decided to annex a Germanic holiday. But never mind all of that.
Yeah.
It didn't happen until 80 years later, someone retroactively wrote about it, you know? I guess that would be a miracle.
Mhm.
Time-traveling monks in the future brought Jesus back to life 80 years in their past. That's how you start a religion, folks. I could just see, Claudius, I've used the Antikythera mechanism, and I've invented time travel. Whatever shall we do? Why, let's go back 80 years and trick some of those people in the Palestine province and start a new religion, just for fun. What's the worst that could happen?
Logically account for the beginning of a Christian movement. I mean, it's a fascinating thing to try to explain. And I guess I'm kind of coming at this with the priors of suspicion, but part of that is because that's the conversation that I'm trying to have, right?
Yeah.
In the same way, and I mean this sincerely, if I was sat with like a hardcore atheist or a Jesus mythicist, I would be like hammering the Christian scholarship as best as I could to
For sure.
to do that too. But I'm interested in what your priors are here, Dr. Collins. Like what do you think you sort of bring to the table when you open this book?
Again, I came to faith in this journey that began in an atheist perspective, and then recognized that point of view could not really hold up to even rational argument. If somebody once said to me, suppose you had to draw a circle that represents all the knowledge in the universe, what would that look like? And of course,
No.
okay.
No.
Oh
no.
That's like the worst version of one
Yes.
of the worst arguments.
Yes. That is a ridiculously bad argument. It's basically a god of the gaps. That's essentially what it is.
It literally
You don't-
is. It's
you
like,
don't
look,
have
here's the
all the
gap,
knowledge.
God's in it.
Right. But it also can be applied to other arguments as well. For instance, how many trees have you seen grow? Well, how do you know? There isn't a tree out there that can't grow without any nutrients and any sunlight, kind of thing. Like it's kind of just it's basically a problem of induction argument. Like if you haven't seen everything, you can't make any categorical statements about the universe because you've only seen a tiny portion of it. That's not how induction works, right? Like, yeah, we can't rule it out absolutely, but enough situate. Like, how do you know there isn't a place in the universe where gravity doesn't work in reverse, for instance? Well, we understand how gravity works because it keeps working like this, but your knowledge, you haven't seen all of the universe. This is kind of the argument that they're making, that, hey, if you've only seen 1% of the universe, how do you know there's not a God hiding in there somewhere, kind of thing? Come on, it's ridiculous. Because the opposite is also true. How much of the universe does Francis Collins know? So how do you know there is the God there if you know so little about the universe? Like, you can't just assume there's a God there because you know so little. Like, the opposite can be leveraged as well. So it is a terrible, terrible argument. Absolutely abysmal.
It's terrible under the best of circumstances. It's fucking disgraceful coming from one of the most decorated scientists currently alive.
Yeah.
It's, my goodness, like,
Yep.
we don't do anything else that way. Like, he understands, he has to understand that for anything in science to make any sense, you have to make reasonable extrapolations. That's how you get you make observations, you extrapolate and construct a hypothesis, and then test the hypothesis. Fuck! He knows this, but I don't know, maybe he's doing special pleading gymnastics in his mind or something, but it's fucking disgraceful.
Now, drawn within that, the circle that represents what you know and you ever will know on this earth. So suppose the knowledge of God's existence is outside your circle. Seems plausible on the scale. How could you then say, I know there is no God? And be sure of it.
Yeah, and I think anybody who says that is firstly mistaken about their epistemic capabilities, and secondly probably not thinking of the right kind of God, right? I think that's probably the case.
Right. Well, so
I agree with you.
An easy way to kind of get away from the far end of that spectrum we talked about earlier, into something that was more of, okay, let's figure out what might be outside of what I currently know, and what would it say about this question? And again, we traveled, as we talked about earlier, through the structure of the universe as an indicator of, for me, a pretty impressive mind that is behind the way in which the whole thing has been put together. And then on to the direction of, does God care about me? And on to the direction of good and evil. We talked about that earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. Because you are arguing that, if I understood you, that you can't really say that the Judeo-Christian tradition claims to have an insight about good and evil, because you can see things in the Bible that we would now say are evil that were considered okay as part of that practice, the treatment of women, slaves, the Canaanites, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a really important distinction here. If you look down through all cultures, people of faith and not, I will be challenged to find any culture that didn't agree there was such a thing as good and a thing that was evil.
Well, a couple of points. First of all, he's not an anthropologist. Second, more importantly, more pertinent. That's the word I'm looking for. Not all cultures view things in a strict binary. This is such a European thing, and it drives me crazy. There's entire cultures based on the idea that there is no moral absolute, that everything is gray. Because what you do that is right for one person will be a wrong to another person. That's a not. Simmer down and focus, Ember. That isn't automatically true any more than this black and white thinking is true. It's the same type of fallacy, just done in a different way, saying everything is gray, because sometimes things are more right or more wrong, but it's very subjective. But it is situational. These other cultures, they have a more nuanced perspective about things, and so they tend to reach more reasonable conclusions. But the point is, Francis is wrong. He's doing this European colonist perspective because our colonization hundreds of years ago has erased most indigenous cultures. People tend to think the way the colonials made them think when they erased their cultures, but the cultures that do persist tend to not think that way. It's not a concept of good and concept of evil, but also trying to correlate these two unrelated things, a culture that conceives of good and evil, and also there's some kind of religion. Is he trying to, Judeo-Christian not being good enough, is he trying to take credit for all religions, therefore Christianity? It's infuriatingly, it's upsetting, yes.
And there's also a lot of moral diversity out there. Not just small stuff, but also between past cultures. There's been some very large amounts of, like, some cultures thought that sacrificing children was a good idea. That was completely moral because you would get benefit for the population from a god approving of your sacrifice. There was the Aztecs and things sacrificing people, like that would have been seen as a moral good. So you can't just sort of make an appeal to emotion and say, well, there's good and evil. And, I think that it's a lot more nuanced than that. And you're sort of just claiming there is, but you're ignoring that in the Old Testament, a lot of these things happened as well. I mean, Abraham, the father of your religion, was about to sacrifice his child, and that would have been seen as a morally good thing to do. And that's in your own book. So, there's a problem there with you saying, hey, there is good and evil absolutely out there. It's like, well, is there? Because if God commands you to genocide people, that's apparently a good thing. It was a great blessing for these children to be unalived.
Yeah, for real. It's such a weird thing for him to specifically reference that the Bible has things that we today would consider immoral, and then try to take credit for there being a sense of morality. Like, cool, I will grant you, for the sake of this argument, I will grant you there is such a thing as good, and as you have just stated, your holy book ain't it. So is your God evil? Or just doesn't exist, If you want to paint this picture where there's only good and only evil in absolute terms, and by your own reasoning, your God cannot be good, that means either he has to be evil or he doesn't exist. You pick your favorite, Francis, but this is your logic here.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean that he has to be evil. It just means that he's not all good. You know, like I think that when you're talking about people, I'm more to people. I more give acts are good and evil, but you know, people inherently, it's complicated because you can have you know, a really person that does really horrible stuff. You know, like the gangster who goes around, you know, doing thuggery and murdering people and, you know, threatening people, but is really kind and nice and wonderful to his family. You know, like it's a lot more nuanced than that when it comes to people.
In theory. I don't know if Francis would feel that way. I guess I'll let him finish his sentence now.
Yeah.
It just, if I let him go on too much, I'm going to build up too many points. And you've been seeing how I'm having difficulty like focusing my thoughts into specific points. If I let it build up too much, I will just explode. And then there will be a mess.
But they might disagree profoundly about what fits in each list. And things that we would now say are evil might have been considered not just okay, but actually laudable in other faiths, other cultures. But they would still argue, yes, there's a good and there's an evil, and we're supposed to do the good thing. And why is that? And that's, again, where I found it difficult to explain that away on a purely evolutionary sociobiology kind of direction. And that,
well, first of all, why would you have to explain it away? And second, why would it have to be evolutionary when we have a whole different field for explaining why humans do human things? Why do you have to explain it in terms of your science? And if you can't, then magic? What the fuck are we doing here?
Well, I've noticed this about geneticists, and I noticed this all the way back in uni when you met someone doing genetics. It's kind of when all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. So I was talking about sort of behavioral sciences at one point, and this guy studying genetics was like, no, everything comes down to genetics, like everything. And I'm like, really? You don't think that there's behavioral and how you're raised has an influence on it? And he's like, no, it's all genetics. And it's like, wait, if you like get taught to plug in a seatbelt, you know, would that be more likely for you to do so than someone who, you know, is genetically inclined to, but never gets taught to put their seatbelt? You know what I mean? Like there's definitely a behavioral component and a environmental component to behavior. But you know, this person studying genetics, once you learn about genetics, you're like, everything's genetics. And I think that's where he's coming from. Everything's genetics, nothing's behavioral kind of thing. So yeah. But it's almost like he says, just because there's a concept of good and evil, there has to be a, you know, somebody to give that. So that what his argument is that good and evil sort of ontologically or in actuality exists as a real thing because all cultures have a concept of good and evil, which is weird. I don't think that follows. I think that
no.
Well, I think that all cultures just have a what you ought to do and ought not to do, and that's all. You know, and I think that arises naturally through social interaction. I don't see that necessarily as having to be a thing in the world.
It seems like a bit of a reach to me. Like, you know, to try to steelman his position, he's saying, I observe that all humans broadly consider some things good and some things evil.
Right.
Since humans could not have possibly come up with that on their own, there must be an external force that told them there is some things are good and some things are evil. And therefore, that external force is my personal interpretation of my denomination's translation of this one religion's holy scripture. It's my
Right.
favorite version of the concept of a god
Mhm.
for some reason. You know, there's a few skips in there.
Right, right.
Forced me into this recognition that there is a source there that I can't explain scientifically. And if I was looking for a source outside of science, it seems like it's a holy source that cares
Oh,
about
thank
good
you.
and wants me to follow that rule, even though I'm pretty lousy at it. And that adds a whole other dimension to this mathematical physicist God, who now is a God of love and of goodness, who's calling me to do the same. So I
Well, is he though? You were just talking about how the Bible talks about, you know, slavery and smashing babies on rocks thing. So where do you get this idea that your God is love? Like I know we have that whole New Testament thing with
Mhm.
the passage in Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, but that does not match the description God gives of himself or any of his actions. So are you worshiping that God, or what are we doing? It's almost like he's got like 6 or 7 different gods, and a lot of Christians do this. So many Christians
Yes.
do this. They have like 6 or 7 different gods, and they're trying to pretend they're all the same God, and they switch
Yes.
between which one they're talking about depending on the topic of under discussion.
Right. Or depending on what outcome they want for any given situation. Like if you don't like the person and you want to, you know, sort of attack them, you go to, you know, this sort of Old Testament Yahweh kind of thing. If you like the person, then you go to like that. That's the problem with this book. It kind of, you can get anything you want out of it, so that you're supporting anything that you want.
Yeah, maybe that's the appeal. All this time I thought it was so that people could like keep their religion but eat shellfish.
Maybe.
One of those.
approach the New Testament in that same perspective. And I be quite honest, I have not delved into a lot of the debates amongst New Testament theologians about M and Q and what got added here and what got subtracted there. I just have not
What
felt the need for
God
that because what I
added? What
read,
God added? No, that's not
Well,
what the debate is. It's what people added.
I think he said what got added, as in
Oh,
what
okay,
was
gotcha.
added.
I thought he said God added, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Sorry, my bad, my bad.
It's all good. He, believe it or
Hmm.
not, he's got a bit of an accent too. Most of us, not me, of course. I speak pure, proper, no accent
Everybody
English.
has an accent. That's the thing. Like I see the chat. Thank you. I think that the Australian accent's kind of weird, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, it keeps things interesting. You know, this, of course, also proves God because the Tower of Babel story shows that when there get to be too many people who all speak the same language, those languages
Hmm.
have to diverge. It's
Right.
it's it's God magic. That's how that works. Yeah.
I wonder why, though, it's shocking to Americans that they have an accent to people who aren't Americans. Why is that shocking? Like, why are they shocked by that? It's so weird to me.
Well, I mean, there's a few different factors to it. One is Americans, because of our education, we tend to forget there are other countries. We're kind of indoctrinated to think that there's the USA and then there's just other land on the planet that,
Mm,
you know, they like have flags and capitals and currency and whatnot, but it's basically unoccupied land that we just haven't gotten
right,
around to
right.
selling yet, you know? It's a very imperialist perspective on things.
Mhm.
But also there's that whole total lack of introspection that is permeates our culture, partly because of education, but partly because of culture. And
Mm,
we don't really think about how we seem to other people, like, ever. Our current administration being Exhibit A. You know, I mean, there are a few of us, of course, us loony liberals and our people who have ever been to any therapy ever, but we're seen as like weak or you know, ivory tower academics or whatever, and it's kind of poo-pooed by the rest of the population.
mhm. Fair enough.
Yeah.
through there, is actually ringing true to me as something that represents what I think I need to know in big sweeping terms about God and about Jesus. I do find it compelling as far as not just the life and the crucifixion, but the resurrection. But I know I can't prove that.
Mhm.
But sometimes I get tired of all the arguments of the Jesus group, and theologians on one side or the other sort of seem to be missing the point. What is it we're really trying to take away from this?
Yeah.
Did Jesus really walk amongst us? Did he really speak the words in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, which is just so radical, so incredibly outside of what you would have expected for the Son of God to be saying, calling us to love not just our neighbors, but our enemies. It must have been radical at the time. It must have set people completely on their ears to hear that. And we're still supposed.
Well, I mean, no.
Well,
In first century Palestine, maybe it was a bit
Yeah.
on the lefty side, but there'd been people running around spreading the word of Buddha for like 500 years at that point.
right. Well, so here's the thing. Like, I could just grant that, right? I could just say, hey, yeah, it was radical ideas for the time. You know, just say it is like sort of really, really, really radical and progressive for the time. Sure. But that doesn't make anything else true. It doesn't mean that he rose from the dead. It doesn't mean that he was the Son of God. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. I could grant you all of that he was a radically progressive, itinerant Jewish rabbi who said things that people had never heard before. I could grant all of that. It still doesn't get you to a God.
It's true. We're kind of hyper focusing on the trees and missing the forest.
Yeah, kind
Look
of.
at the trees.
But you know, and like the way that the church became huge, that wasn't a sort of that wasn't coincidence either, right? So when you look at the very early church, who it appealed to, right? It appealed to people who were very poor. And one thing that has been true all throughout history, poor people vastly outnumber rich people, right? That's been true throughout history, that people with very little means vastly outnumber people who have a ton of wealth, right? So it's very, very appealing to people with very little money or no money or a lower social status, or slaves, for instance. You know, when they sort of say, hey, you know, there are no slaves in Jesus, that's appealing to slaves. And the early church, funnily enough, was also appealing to women because they had certain status in the church that allowed them to gain power. Now that changed as we went up to, you know, the fifth and sixth centuries, but you know, the early church did have places for women that were esteemed. They had value. So it's not that surprising that the religion took off, because it really promoted that poor people had status above rich people, right? Like, you know, it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, kind of thing, right? It promoted that, hey, if you were poor, you were actually more valuable than a rich person, which is a radical idea for the time. But it's not a miracle that the church suddenly started growing when it sort of advocated for people of very little means. Because before that, especially in the Roman era, well, what did you have to do to get the ear of the god in Rome? You had to give valuable sacrifices, right? Like you had to have wealth and sort of have a shrine in your house and have these, you know, poor people can't afford that. But when you have a religion come along to say, hey, not only are you equal to all of the people with the power, but in fact you're more valuable, that's very appealing for them. So that's how Christianity started to grow very rapidly, because it appealed to people who were abundant, like, you know, poor people. So when they sort of go, oh, it's a miracle that, no, not really. No, not at all, really.
Populism.
Well, But I put it to theists before that just because, like, just say Jesus had these radical ideas that were progressive, really good ideas, maybe the reason why Christianity, it wasn't a miracle, but maybe it was more appealing than other religions around at the time to people. Maybe it was just a more popular and better philosophy.
Or a bit of both, like you were saying about the sacrifices. I mean, people make a big deal about how Jesus put an end to sacrifices, but that's Paul, right? Like,
Right.
right after the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus heals a dude and tells the dude, go see a priest and make a sacrifice. Because A, Jesus is not a priest, and B, we're
Right.
still doing sacrifices, you know?
Mhm.
So, okay, but under Paul's interpretation, you no longer have to bring doves and goats and sheeps and other things that you can't afford to the temple because you
Right.
had your period or whatever, all this mundane shit you're supposed to
Mm.
sacrifice for. It's no
And that
wonder the priests weren't a fan.
Well, yes, and that sort of explains a lot about sort of the story about him whipping the money changers in the temple. Now, I have a lot of doubts about this story because anywhere there is money, especially in that era, they're going to have guards, right? Like if you've got money changers, like people that are basically taking products and giving monies, they're basically like stock traders as well as bankers as well as things like you're going to have guards. The whole idea that someone can come in there and but he probably spoke out about them a lot and the story grew. Maybe he yelled at them in the temple, and maybe that grew into he, fashioned a cord out of his robe thing and whipped them out of the temple kind of thing. When he would not have had the authority to do so. But like if you're having a religion that is basically saying, hey, give me money, we will give you these sacrificial lambs or these sacrificial chicken or whatever you have, and that's the way that you gain status and you get ahead in life, is if you give us money for these sacrifices. I can understand why that religion would not be popular among poor people. Like if they're basically, and like, let's face it, the prosperity gospel is doing exactly that. I don't know how you get from, hey, these priests are basically leeches on you, like charging you for sacrifices that they're convincing you have to have or else your life is going to be bad. They're evil and wicked for doing so, to give me money and your life will get better through God. Like, how do you get there? I've never understood that, the prosperity gospel.
It's a lot of interpretation. I'm chuckling at this one comment. One by Land says it was temple crypto, no physical assets.
Right,
Just
right.
yeah, it was.
Yeah,
It was non-fungible tokens.
it was temple, yeah, NFTs, yeah.
Why isn't there a Church of the Holy NFT yet? Oh, goodness.
Ah, dear. I gotta say, I really loved John Oliver's segment, Our Lady of the Perpetual Exemption, I think it was. That was
Yeah.
so good. If you have not seen that, it is absolute gold because he sort of showed what somebody needed to do to make a church for a start in under US tax law. It's so vague. All you really need to do is have a bunch of people go, yes, we believe,
Three.
and this is a church.
Three
Sorry, 3
people.
people.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, it's still a bunch, just an unknown amount of people. But he basically said, hey, we gather in here once a week for my show. That counts because we do it weekly and it's ritualistic. Like we have a ritual.
True.
So that counts. So he just basically made the audience his congregation. They all affirmed to believe in what he was saying, and they became a tax exempt church for the purpose of that. And then he could basically promise them anything in exchange for money. Anything.
Mhm.
Cure cancer, make their lives 100% better. bring them back from the dead eventually. He could promise whatever he wanted, and all of this was legal. And that was the horrifying part, that he could prey on vulnerable, and John Oliver, obviously he didn't, but he could prey on desperate people, and it's all completely legal, even though he's saying this is totally fake.
The United States is a wild west.
It's not just United States.
Too.
Same is true as religion in Australia and a lot of other countries. It's not just, there is a special exemption for churches because of the hangover of religious imperialism and colonialization, that we have these organizations which have no responsibility to any of their congregation for producing any kind of results in exchange for taking their money. They have absolutely no accountability. They do not have to open their books to the public to show what they've actually spent it on. A donor organization, they have to say, hey, this is what we spend our money on. Churches don't. And some of them have got, and the tax exempt status. Some of them have, and I'm looking at you, Mormons, have bought so much real estate, equity. They've got basically a massive portfolio that they pay zero tax on. And that is horrible, because they are making so much money. I think it's the Seventh-day Adventists that own Sanitarium, like breakfast food company, and they pay zero tax on it because they're a church. Crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't mind an organization being tax exempt if they are putting back into the community, and that's why we have tax exempt organizations, charities and things like that, like the atheist organizations that do community work. They're tax exempt. Totally understand. But there's churches out there doing massive amounts of harm and still not paying taxes, and people are getting insanely rich from it.
Personal enrichment, exactly what Jesus talked about. It's wild to me that in this country where we're all about fuck the government and use any loophole you can to succeed, that we don't all have churches by now. Like, as soon as you're born, your parents should get together with your godparents, and now there's more than 3 people, and boom, you have a church. So your whole life you're completely exempt from taxes and most government oversight. Why aren't we doing that if that's the system we've set up? It's so strange.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more complicated than that, because the individuals aren't exempt from taxes. It's just because they don't have to show their books. A lot of these pastors run their, especially the prosperity gospel ones, like Creflo Dollar and things like that. They run it like a slush fund, essentially. So, like Hovind is doing now, because he learnt from his mistakes. He doesn't own anything. It's all the church that owns it, and he just uses the proceeds as the pastor of the church. His mistake was taking money out and giving it to himself instead of just spending it directly. That was his mistake, because then he had income himself that is then subject to tax. So, he made the mistake of never applying. He easily would have got tax exempt status under religion, but he never applied for it. So that was his mistake, because he's a tax protester and a charlatan who defrauded the government because he never actually applied for tax exempt status under religion. Why you wouldn't, I have no idea, but he didn't. So, but these prosperity gospel guys, they never actually own anything. It's the church that owns it, and they run the church in an authoritarian way, slapping down anybody that tries to take it from them. And that's why these people like Hovind are always so scared that somebody is after their congregation, after their church, because they don't own anything. It's all in the name of the church, in the ministry's name. So they're always paranoid about people coming for their ministry because that's their slush fund. That's their money.
Yeah. I could go on and on and on about some of the weird idiosyncrasies of the way we do churches and tax laws and whatnot in this country, but dare I say, we're getting
it's the same over here. It's the same over here. And I mean, then you get Scientology who just make up a religion in order. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even know if they believe in the nonsense that they're peddling, like the people higher up, because it is balmy, but they certainly do enjoy that tax-free status.
Oh, yes. It's almost like they're taking advantage of things, like in the scam kind of way or something. I don't know. I'm probably silly.
Like, there is something to be said. Like, I totally get if somebody's very poor and they're taking advantage of tax loopholes to get by, like families and stuff. But it's gotten to the point where these big businesses, they pay nothing. And I think that who was it? David Mitchell, who's an English comedian. I love David Mitchell. One of the things that he said that absolutely rang true for me was that really people that are very, very, the Epstein class, basically, they're so rich and they can afford to find these loopholes that really they pay the tax that they want to pay, right? So all that's causing them to be taxed is that their own conscience, right? Like how much they actually care and feel guilty about not paying towards society. And he pointed out that, as any economist will tell you, if you want people to stop doing something, you tax it, right? Like you put a tax on cigarettes, you put a tax on alcohol. It's to stop people from doing it, or at least deter them from doing it. So basically, we've got an insane situation where the government now taxes rich people's conscience.
And that's why we're all going bankrupt.
Right. And this is why the Epstein class exists, because it is the people with a conscience that will never reach that ultra-rich status because that conscience is taxed and they're deterred from having a conscience. So, yes, one point says, hey, it's a lack of conscience that, signifies these people, but also, the ultra-rich are deterred from having a conscience. I think it's a two-way thing. You don't get to that point if you have a conscience, and also you're deterred from having one because it's taxed. So I think that guy's hilarious. He was the Are We the Baddies guy. That was David Mitchell. Yeah. Hans,
that's fair.
Are we the baddies?
Possibly. I mean, it depends on which group we're talking about. Like, are we the English-speaking colonists and things? Yeah, that's probably us. But are we the ones telling people they should go like murder the babies of foreigners? I'm not on that team. No. So, nuance. Another thing we don't do here in the United States.
And deep state, like now Trump is suing his own government for leaking those tax statements to the tune of $10 billion when he promised on the campaign trail he would be releasing his taxes, which is an insane situation.
Mm-hmm. I know, being held to account to a thing he'd promised he'd do.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a first in his life, yes. It's fucking wild.
Supposed to hear it, and that calls to me. I can't unread that, and I can't take away from what I see. And again, maybe I'm too much influenced by those 738 pages on Wright's Resurrection of the Son of God to build, as he builds there, a really compelling case Not an
Okay, so
absolute proof,
this
but
is
a
okay. So this is a problem with Collins because the question was, okay, like, you know, you're talking about my freaky memory. The question was, what are your priors? Right? That was the question. What are your priors? And he's talking about, oh, I can't unsee this if it calls to me. And I had this idea of this, you know, circle of what I know. How does not having complete knowledge of the universe and as a prior get you to a god? And this is the thing that I find fascinating. You know, like like if he said keeps saying he was an atheist, was he raised a Christian? Did he have a Christian background, became an atheist through university maybe? Like, because he's talking about your priors, what you approach the religion with. You know what I mean? Like I approach the Bible with. So what is that? Because just saying it calls to me is not actually giving an answer. Like what you like, why did it call to you? What priors did you enter it with? Because you're saying, hey, Alex entered reading the Bible with skepticism. Yeah, no, I will grant that. Yes. Yes. Generally, if you are not raised in a religion, you will approach any book with skepticism, whether that's a science textbook or the Bible or the Quran or even, you know, some book on the stand for $2 saying that, you know, the jet fuel can't melt steel beams kind of thing. Generally, you will approach everything with a level of skepticism. But what are your priors? He hasn't answered it at all.
Yeah, we're just, you know, well, that's sort of a thing about Christianity, is you're supposed to assume that you have the default position, and it's up to the skeptics to show you that you're mistaken. It's the inertia argument. Here I sit, move me, you know?
Well, yeah, and that's why deconstruction is especially powerful, because if your only reason really is grounded, really when you drill down to it, is that your parents taught you that this was true, so then you need somebody to prove that it's not, there's a problem there, right? That you know, you've accepted that it's true without a real reason. You've just been taught that growing up, and now, you know, you need somebody to convince you otherwise. But shouldn't you, if you were older and you were taught it, you would say, well, I need more reasons than my parents telling me, right?
Mhm. The shit that my parents have told me. We're not going to talk about that. But I wasn't even raised religious.
Yeah.
My grandmother was very religious, though, but I don't want to get into that either. It's a whole thing. I was one of those asshole kids who kept asking questions like, if there's only one God, then why does God himself say there are other gods? Is God lying? Like, what are we doing here? I can read the book, Grandma.
compelling case for the most likely conclusion that the resurrection really happened. And if so, that's the most important event that ever happened in history. And I don't want to waste my time unnecessarily in debating points about this bit of scripture or that. It conveys a certain kind of compelling truth that I'm willing to take on board without being certain that it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I think most Christians probably think in the same way about the resurrection of Jesus, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And people come to believe for all kinds of reasons, right? There are people who say that they come to believe in God. Lee Strobel is a good example of this, someone who seems to just investigate the evidence for the resurrection, and that's what does it. But I think that's not the most usual case. I think more commonly people come to believe in God for other reasons, for moral reasons, for social reasons, or because it speaks to them in a way that they can't quite explain. And
yes. So that's what I see from Collins. Just emotionally, it calls to me. It's very easy for humans to sort of get into this. It's not really, I wouldn't say it's problematic. It's just, it seems to be a flaw around us that a lot of times we go into this wishful thinking, like what we want to be true, rather than, you know, look at things objectively. Like, you know, oh, I can't believe that my wife is cheating on me. She would never do that. But what are the actual facts around the case? A part of the reason why you cannot psychoanalyze yourself is because you are too close to it. You need an outside impartial observer. You can't even, like, if you have, like, my mother was a psychologist and she cannot psychoanalyze me, right? Like, you cannot have somebody with an emotional connection to the person psychoanalyze them. It's a big no-no because you will be colored by that. Doesn't matter how sort of objectively that person thinks. It doesn't matter how they try to be unbiased. If they have an emotional connection, that will distort that analysis of that person. It just will. So we have to have somebody who is a neutral party, you know, a professional psychologist to do that, who has no connection to them whatsoever. That is the only way to do it. Because if you do, you're going to come up with wrong results.
And there's so many other reasons. People get sucked into religion too. You know, it's, my grandmother tried, and for a lot of people, that's how it happens, is they're raised with that. But also there was tremendous amount of peer pressure. I was the only kid at my elementary school who didn't go to a church. And all the other kids were like, you should come to church with us, you know, all that sort of stuff. There's that whole, that special secret club, this other space that everyone else is allowed into, but you're not because you're different. And it just, none of this has anything to do with whether it's true, but there's forces that act on you, even as a small child, to try to push you into that, you know?
Yeah. And they come to the Gospels with this sense that they know it's true and they sort of want to learn more about it, right? And I think that that is perfectly legitimate. But of course, in my sort of worldview here, as an atheist or someone who doesn't believe in Christianity and the resurrection of Jesus, when somebody comes to me and says, well, then hold on, what about this historical case of the resurrection? That's where I kind of have to get a bit nitpicky, because I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to confront me with evidence for the resurrection, then I'm going to say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? But I totally understand that as a personal quest to understand, the nature of Christianity and coming to know Jesus as a Christian, this is probably like an inappropriate approach to that, right? But as somebody who's confronted with the evidence, that's the approach that one has to take.
I think I got to ask you then: is the path towards making a decision about belief or non-belief, is that a totally rational path, or is there room for revelation?
Oh, I think if I experienced revelation, I think that could be a kind of rational. Depends what you mean by rational. But if, like, what do you mean? Do you mean?
Yes, if you personally experienced revelation, then that is, for you at least, an empirical thing. It's not something you could show to someone else, but for you to make a decision based on that would be rational, because you're going off of a data point that you have had access to.
Yes. I think, though, that like you say, it's for you, though, and that does nothing for me. And just because I don't believe that you have seen a God or experienced a God in some way doesn't mean that I'm criticizing you and saying that you're lying. I think that you had an experience, but I've got no way to access that experience. Just as if I say, hey, I saw somebody last night, you've got no way to access whether that is true or not. You know, like, and it's sort of, it's very difficult because we don't want to just say, hey, you're completely false, you're making it up, you didn't have this experience or whatever. I would rather think of people as mistaken. I'm not calling them liars. I'm not saying they're making it up. Just they may be mistaken. But I would a revelation change my mind? Absolutely, sure. But to me,
conceivably.
Well, yeah, it definitely, like, if I had a revelation that people sort of describe like just a feeling or whatever, it wouldn't change my mind. But some of the times they say, well, I've had a revelation and that's been a personal interaction with angels or whatever. Yeah, that would probably change my mind if I could, make sure that was not some kind of hallucination or whatever. I would be convinced. But we can't investigate it because that's your revelation. It can't be investigated by anybody else. The real problem is that you believe that a lot of people have had revelations from other gods, and you don't believe them, right? You don't believe that Ahmed down the street has had a revelation from Muhammad and Allah, right? You don't believe that. So that's the thing. Like, why would you expect you having a revelation to convince other people when other people having a revelation in a different religion doesn't convince you? That's what I don't understand, right? Like, it's sort of like you understand that revelations convince nobody when in another religion, but you think revelations should convince people in your to come to your religion.
Yeah, and similarly, we've seen so many people validate that kind of thing. Like, somebody will come to church and they'll give their testimony about how the Holy Spirit appeared to them or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, praise, sing it, brother," all that crap. But if a Muslim comes in and says the exact same thing, but finishes it with, "It must be the prophet instead of Jesus," well, clearly you're just having visions and you need to get some help. The double standard is just absolute.
Will it be purely like argumentative?
Oh, no. I mean, there are certainly people who come to faith on a purely emotional basis. I had this experience. I realized God is real. Jesus spoke to me. I honor that. I recognize that. That's not happened to me. But I have had those moments of feeling like there is something more than I can explain that seems to be part of a relationship that I am trying to build on and often wondering if it's there, but once in a while it is. I'll tell you a story.
Hey, I'll tell you a story, Francis. I have this feeling sometimes, especially when I'm out in nature. There's a few lovely naturey places around where I am, including a place where there's a waterfall with 3 forks, which I'm sure Francis can relate to. And every so often, you get into one of those spaces, whether it's the woodlands or the lake shore or near that big ass waterfall, where like the sounds of nature seem to harmonize and kind of blend together. The crashing waves and the flutter of bird wings and the chirping of insects, it seems to form a kind of symphony altogether. And in those moments, it feels like you're a part of a vast web of life and reality on this world in this moment of time, like the string of a violin, just one note in a vast symphony, but part of such a larger thing. But every so often, those moments come and then they pass. I suspect that kind of feeling is a lot like this religious sense that the numinous, I believe, is what Francis is getting to. This touch of something beyond us that we might call divine. Does that mean that what I think it is what's really happening, or that there's something of a poetry inside the way our consciousness processes information? Beautiful as it may be, it doesn't necessarily indicate some supernatural power.
Right.
Perhaps. Just my 2 cents.
A year and a half ago, as I'm praying about a book I had read, which is about sort of the kind of spiritual discipline that one ought to utilize if you're really going to get yourself closer to an understanding of what your faith is all about. And praying about that and realizing I'm not very disciplined in my faith. And my prayer life, Alex, is mostly a seeking of understanding of something I'm wrestling with. And the skeptic would say, well, that's fine. We should all do that. And so it's just in your head. But it feels like more than that. It feels like it's an opportunity to get some incoming insights that I maybe can't quite manage on my own. And I almost never get a real specific message. Almost never. And this time I did. And it was quite jarring because it wasn't a particularly happy message, but it's changed.
Ooh, Francis got a message. Place your bets. Was it lotto numbers?
Well,
he just said it's not a happy message.
Oh, was it the frozen waterfall thing? Because that is what he has said in the past, because that was so famously it was kind of absurd to me, like just a mundane thing like a frozen waterfall in 3 reminded him of the Trinity. Suddenly he's a believer. That was his story, his conversion story. So I don't know if that has changed. Because why think of the Trinity when you see 3 things? Like, why not think of the 3 Musketeers or the what is it? The three. What was that stupid Mexican film that was a comedy?
Amigos?
Three Amigos. Yeah, why not the 3 Amigos or something?
Praise the Amigos.
Changed the way I'm thinking about things for the last year and a half. And the message was this: don't waste your time. You may not have much left.
That is a feeling that occurs to all of us. That's that existential clock in the back of our heads saying you have to make every moment count, because no matter how long you live, you only have a finite number, and you don't get to know when your last moment is. So enjoy the ones you definitely have, which incidentally is a good reason to, not do the religion thing, because you only have this life. You only have this time that you have, for sure. To bank on there being an afterlife that hasn't been demonstrated, and there's a lot of good reason to believe doesn't exist, and not live this life, or even cause yourself suffering in this life,
Yes.
hoping there's a future one, it's a damn shame. It's a waste of a life.
Or sort of, risk your financial security by giving money to people promising you an eternal life afterwards with absolutely no reason to think that you actually will.
Yeah, that's there's so many wonderful satirical pieces. Like a lady goes to, I think it may be a Dark Matter 2525 comic, but a lady goes to a town called Heaven, and she wants a house in Heaven, and the real estate agent says, okay, you have to sign this contract and pay all your money up front. And the lady's like, don't I get to tour the house first? And he's like, no, you have to buy it first, and then you get to find out what it is someday. If there even is a house, you don't know. You have to take it on faith. But one thing we don't have to take on faith, Omega Star has been a member for 18 months. That's a demonstrable fact. It should be that easy to prove a god, incidentally. Is just pull back the curtain or highlight the comment, as it were, and show the god. Which god? We don't know. We might even believe in a god if you could demonstrate your god rather than any of the others on offer. But Omega Star or Omega 5 Tar, if you want to be technical about it. But I get it. Thank you so much. 18 months, year and a half. And that's a bunch of time. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's fucking cool. So thank you.
Now, that was true the day I was born. Any of us have much time left if we're willing to think about it. But this seemed very pointed. It came a few months before I got a diagnosis of prostate cancer, so maybe that was part of the premonition of what lie ahead. But
thinking about mortality in the same way we
Yes.
all think of mortality after receiving a diagnosis that the end may be upon you. I can't imagine there'd be any relationship. Although points to Francis for admitting that was part of his thinking.
Right. But I would certainly put somebody like it really does upset me that some, like, don't get me wrong, some preachers are fantastic, some pastors are awesome, they really support people regardless or whatever, but some are very predatory. They find people with problems in their life, they find people who are sort of worried about death, fearful about death, and they will prey on it. It is really bad, absolutely horrible. But some are fine. Like, don't get me wrong, some are fine. Some are predatory. And sort of, I don't think you should make any major decisions in your life that you don't have to when you have such a diagnosis. like somebody coming and saying, have you thought about, life after death? That is not, no, that is horrible. I mean, hell, the pastors and priests used to pray on people after they had died. Like after death baptisms was a thing, that they would go, oh, well, this person's a Christian now. They died as an atheist, but we're going to baptize them so they'll be a Christian.
It still is. The Mormons are still doing that, and possibly apparently Father Flanagan is doing that too. I understand he's got a kit for sale. I don't have that commercial handy, so you're lucky on that count. But what I can do is highlight the super chat from Jester. Thank you, Jester. Jester sends us $2 and says, I'm here, God, the Lord of Shenaniganery. See, it's easy when you just show up. Like, just show up. Oh, good. Although we have had God in the chat before. In fact, God super chatted us one time. So, partial credit, I suppose. I have the screenshot somewhere of God sending us a super chat.
It's really affected me that this is a message that requires attention and that I don't think just came out of my own head, because it's not one I would have chosen, but it's a calling of some sort, not to put yourself in a place where days go by and you're just spending your time on things that really don't matter. Invest in relationships, especially loving relationships. Invest in things that might alleviate the suffering that you and I both worry a lot about.
Now, that's good advice, especially for a believer. Don't waste your time on things that don't matter. Focus on the real people who really exist right now.
Yeah. And we have no guarantee that anything is going to be after we die. We can't rule it out, but no one's ever presented that. No one's ever come back from complete brain death. Okay, so anybody telling you that somebody has had total brain death and come back, no, it hasn't happened. I've heard this from evangelical people that, hey, people have lasted hours, and that no, they haven't. Okay, once the brain is gone, it is gone. It's done. It's over. The cells die, and nobody has come back from that. Now, there have been near-death experiences, but notice that near-death experiences, they haven't actually died any more than someone whose heart stops beating, less blood around their oxygen, less oxygen going. You can still come back from that. So they haven't actually died. Nobody has come back from total brain death, ever.
I every time NDEs come up, I go on a whole freaking tangent. For those of you who are new, I've had an NDE, and the fact that it is nothing like anything I've ever heard anyone else describe, TLDR, it tells me it's a function of the brain. But
yeah, and
maybe I'm silly. Maybe I had the real supernatural experience and everyone else was just hallucinating.
Well, and they've done studies on it and found that what you see in a near-death experience, when people have had their heart stop and their brain is dying and then they've been resuscitated, it really comes down to culture. So sort of, Hindu people will see the Hindu iconography. Christian people, Islamic people will see Islamic kind of iconography and signs kind of thing. And it can vary all over the place. Like, it's not necessarily the same. So it seems like it is something that is personal, like it doesn't just happen, you don't just see heaven. People describe it sometimes as a light white. People describe it as a city. People describe it as all kinds of different stuff, even within Christianity. So it is not a consistent thing that people see at all in any way. Some people just see blackness. It really just does depend.
Yeah, for sure. Sygart, another scientist turned apologist. His story is, I went into a garden and I saw the figure of a man. Therefore, it must have been Jesus. I'm like, how do you know it wasn't Buddha? How do you know it wasn't Muhammad? Like, what are we doing?
How do you know? How do you know it wasn't? How do you know it wasn't a god of a religion that was never discovered, but is in fact the true one?
Can't rule that one out either. What if there's a turtle god and you don't even recognize the god when you see him because he's actually a turtle? You know?
I wouldn't mind that. I like turtles. I wouldn't mind it.
Turtles are nice, yeah. Except the snapping
Ah.
ones. I mean, I understand why they have a short temper, but they have a short temper.
Well, sure, sure. But that's just turtle doing turtle things. You just got to accept it.
It's true. Their ways are turtlier than our ways.
Human suffering, invest in ways that maybe could bring people back together at a time where we all seem so divided and mad at each other about everything. It has that effect. Now, again, that was revelation. That was not okay, I sat down and did a logical experiment here and figured out that was the message I need to hear, and then I had it. It like, whoa, surprised me. That's what I mean by revelation. My coming to faith had some of those moments as well, where I could reason myself close to the answer, but it required something more than that to actually take the leap. And I guess coming back to you, because I want to turn the tables on you, what kind of that revelation have you had, or would it take for you to put aside all of the rational arguments, which clearly lead you in this direction, but doesn't sound to me like you're 100% sure you're right? And can you imagine such a thing that would change your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I would love for that to happen. I mean, I don't know exactly what it's like. I was going to ask you a question. I don't want to sort of answer your question with a question, but like, what does it feel like? Or what did it feel like to be sat there praying and there are thoughts flittering through your head and you're thinking about taking out the trash and then there's this one thought that appears in your head that you feel sort of isn't yours, and how it is that you identify. I mean, you said a moment ago that it's because it feels like the kind of thought that you wouldn't have had or wanted to have. So there's that, but like, I don't know, does it strike you? Do you hear it? Do you see it? You know, what?
I felt it. The words were very explicit. It wasn't like a nebulous kind of idea. It was those specific words. Don't waste your time. You may not have much left. And it did.
I've had experiences like that. Like, I mean, there's something I call the voice in the back of my head that seems like an objective, separate entity because it acts outside of my awareness of my own actions. Like, for example, one time I was taking a math test and my eyes had just gotten to the next question, and the voice in the back of my head spits out the answer because it somehow separate from my perception of my perceptions had been reading ahead through my peripheral vision or something like that. And there's other times when it tells me like I'm being stupid, like, Ember, you're being a damn fool, or you stop what you're doing, you need to eat. It gives orders sometimes. It focuses on priorities that really matter. And there's other times when there's sort of an instinctive reaction. One time that especially stands out, and when I became really aware of this voice as like a semi-separate entity, because the math thing has happened a few times throughout my life, but I had a friend in high school who went through moods, shall we say, and one day he was being especially mean, and he just grabbed my hair. I had a long ponytail at the time. He just grabbed my hair and pulled it as hard as he could, brought me to the floor, and I don't know, something about a person that I was like flirting with the previous day, he was big mad about, and I was like, enough of this shit. I'm done with this dude. And I was ready to show him some hands or something. And so I went to follow him, and the voice in the back of my head just kind of screamed at me, no, let it go.
Right. Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do I
we all
have
have these.
maybe, I suppose?
No, I think, and it sort of annoys me because people like Jordan Peterson is sort of like, well, what if God is your conscience kind of thing? And it's like, well, then it's a pretty selective and weird God that doesn't stop some people, but does stop me from doing horrible. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like it isn't something that is consistent or logical or anything like that, because there's sometimes where you go, oh, that'll be fine, and I'm not going to hurt anybody, and your conscience doesn't say anything, and then you end up doing something wrong, and you're very apologetic for it because you're not a bad person, but it's sort of like, well, where were you that time, conscience or God or whatever you want to call it? I think that's sort of, it's really putting God into the realm of just ordinary stuff, like it just is just that's not even like what I would consider a God kind. At that point, you're just putting the name God onto something utterly mundane. But we all have these kind of facets of ourselves that all vie and say, like, what you're describing is kind of like a petulant child, that sort of, that sort of frame that you're in, that you're like, oh well, I'm gonna put up hands and fuck this guy up, basically, like that sort of petulant, I've been hurt, I'm gonna hurt somebody else kind of thing. And then you
Exactly.
have the reasonable adult going, no, that's just going to create more antagonism. You're not going to prove that, anything from it. It's kind of pointless, like it doesn't get you anywhere, and you're going to feel really bad afterwards. That sort of these competing voices, they're not unknown to science. Like, these kind of facets of our own personality really do occasionally seem like somebody else says something to you, right? That somebody speaks to you, but it's not anybody speaking to you. It's just another facet of your mind. And these sort of modes that we have, there's multiple of them. There's petulant child. There's the happy child. When you can really delight in doing something childish. Like that real innocent happiness of, have you ever swung on a swing on an adult and you feel like a child and it feels great and you're happy, kind of thing? Like that sort of happy child is a thing. It's not your conscience, but it's not your bad side either. There's the critical parent, and that one is the one that says, oh, you're terrible, you never make it. And that's a big deal for people as well. That's something we've got to acknowledge and sort of, really challenge with the rational adult to say, hey, no, that's wrong. Like, don't listen to that voice. And all of these sort of things we can interpret as, a god, but it's not. They're very ordinary. They can be wrong. They can be completely mistaken. It's not a good way to say what is real and what's not real. Well, I've got a feeling that there's another person talking to me. Yeah, they are. It's you. Neurologists and psychologists have sort of described humans as sort of the human mind as, 5 weasels in a trench coat kind of thing. Like, it really is a pack of different identities all rolled up into one. And that's part of the human experience. And they seem to be based upon times of our life, right? Like, the petulant child is when we're very young. The rational adult is when we've gotten older and developed our mind. The happy child is also from when we're young, but so is like, all of these different modes are at different points in your life. So the human is sort of an amalgamation of all of the identities you have been and sort of are growing into. So, but I don't see any reason to think that's a god. My conscience has been wrong before. Just completely
Same.
wrong. And it seems to be based upon what you know as a person, like what I know about things. Like, it seems to be limited by my knowledge. Why? Because it's me. That's who it is. It's me. So it only has access to the knowledge that I have. So that it cannot be a god, not in the way that Francis Collins is talking about here. A lot of Christians say, oh, I had this entirely blissful experience. Well, I've had that while listening to music.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had that experience. It doesn't require a God or Jesus or anything like it. It's just, a blissful experience. It happens. Savor it.
Sure. But yeah, on that note, we never ever hear of a person who experiences that kind of voice or has a feeling or something, and suddenly they know, their child who's been missing for 12 hours is being kept in the basement at 1101 Elm Street. It's never knowledge that you don't already have.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yep. It's compartmentalized to your knowledge. And maybe a bit of your intuition. Like, maybe you can make some intuitive jumps about that. Like, oh, I don't have a good feeling about this person. But it's never that clear as to, hey, this guy's on the Epstein files and, you really shouldn't go near him. You're just like, they're a bit creepy. you know, if God was relaying stuff to you in a way that was useful, it would be more accurate. And, you know, you would have people that could, you know, I mean, one of the people that I pick on in Fundamentalist Fails is that Troy Black guy who makes the most vague prophecies ever and goes, oh, yeah, they all come true. And it's like, yeah, if you make them vague enough, sure.
I prophesy it will be dark all night until morning, even.
Well, it was funny. The one that I did was on his Sesame Street prophecy, just because, you know, it was just funny seeing him say, "Oh, Sesame Street," and I have a prophecy about Big Bird. You know, it's just fun. It's just empirically funny. But sort of he said, "Oh, well, you know, you know, as I pointed out, there was already articles about Sesame Street being cancelled after their current season." So he didn't prophesy, but he's like, oh, I had a dream where they may be picked up again by another channel or maybe gone forever. Those are the
What?
only two options. Like,
you know, Mark, we may one day encounter aliens or be alone forever.
Oh my, you are a prophet. I
It's
believe.
true.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Oh my goodness.
Not makes sense for this to be
Yeah.
something that my mind was likely to have come up with, because it was not what I wanted to hear as I'm in the middle of that prayer moment, which was a serious prayer moment. I was reasonably well focused, not expecting this.
Yeah. Well, I can say that if I had that kind of experience, I don't know if I had that experience in isolation that I would sort of believe in God, just because I've heard some kind of thought that maybe if the nature of the thought was different, if the nature of the thought was distinctly like, here I am, something like that, then if I sort of heard a voice, so to speak, that said something like, you know, don't waste your time, you might not have much left, or said something like, you should spend more time with your mother, or something like that, then I would think that.
Ooh, I've had that feeling too. Both of my grandmothers died in my young adulthood, and with both of them, I had a premonition 2 weeks before, not that they were about to die, but that I should get in touch with them and show them, you know, updated pictures of their great grandkids, because it's been a minute, you know, and they may not have much time left. That was a general feeling. And it's like not 2 weeks to the minute, but in that range, right? And so I got in touch, and I'm like, hey, I just wanted to bring you, you know, new pictures of the grandkids and like all that. Because my one grandmother lived, you know, on the other side of the continent, and my other grandmother lived in like elder care, but not like nursing home elder care, like the your time is limited kind of elder care, you know?
Palliative, palliative care.
Yeah. It just, you know, sometimes those flashes of intuition come to you, and sometimes it's weird how precise they are. You know, the mother of my 3 older kids, she had a similar premonition. She woke up out of a dead sleep and just knew that her great grandmother was gone, and it just happens to be that her great grandmother passed that night about that time, at least according to her. I wasn't there for that part, but sometimes weird shit happens. But does that mean there's not just something in the universe we may not understand, but that means necessarily that one specific version of one specific translation of one specific religion's idea of what's going on is literally true? It's a bit of a reach.
If you're allowed to appeal for something like that example, somebody waking up in the middle of the night and sort of thinking that their mother has passed, and sort of, you know, oh, it's supernatural, mysterious powers. If you get to appeal to the supernatural, then I get to appeal to, say, quantum entanglement, right? That someone passed and it was quantumly entangled into some cells in your brain in that way. You know, like, why is one explanation better than the other? Because we have no evidence that quantum entanglement can do that, right? None whatsoever. But on the flip side, we've got no evidence of the supernatural either. So you can't do what Collins has been doing and saying, well, God of the gaps, we don't know why that happened, so therefore it is a God, right? You can't do that any more than I can say, well, we don't know what happened, therefore it's quantum entanglement. It's the same argument. It's an appeal to ignorance, not rational at all.
Yeah. Magic leprechauns did it. Unicorns did it. The Blarney Stone did it. Nil, the great not god and creator of creator gods. Flying spaghetti monster. Praise Doug. All the things.
Yep. And don't forget that if you're using a deductive argument like that, well, it must have been this because it can't be any of the other reasons. You also have to eliminate any explanation that we haven't even thought of yet. Right? Like some kind of implant by aliens, you know, it could be anything. You can't say, I don't know, therefore this is the reason. Those two statements are contradictory.
It's just not good business.
It's a good attempt at an English accent. Good attempt.
What's that?
It's just not good business. That was a pretty good attempt at an English accent. Pretty good. I like it. I like it.
Okay. I don't even know where that came from. I'm gonna blame the medicine on that one.
Sure, why not? The devil made you do it.
Increase my
Yes, the devil. We have proof, folks.
My credence in God's existence to some minimal degree, but I'd consider it this sort of happy mystery. If the nature of the message was theological in tone, and it struck me with that kind of surprise and intrigue, then I would absolutely, I would love for that to happen. I really would, and I wouldn't rule it out. And I think that one of the most legitimate ways to come to believe in God, if not the most legitimate way, is through sort of personal experience and revelation. It's not the kind of thing that's going to convince another person. That's why it's laughed out of the room in debates. If you're doing a public debate with somebody, like if we were here having a debate and you were trying to sort of convince me that God existed, and you said, well, I had this sort of message from God, then everyone would laugh you out of the room because that's not going to convince anybody. But that's not supposed to convince anybody. As far as it's convincing you, it's like the most legitimate way imaginable.
That's right.
To come to believe in God. And
I do just want to pause for a moment to highlight that while Alex frequently talks with Bill Craig and just oozes respect in his general direction, that's unintentionally a big burn to William Lane Craig, because for over his entire career and to this very day, he still argues there's 5 reasons I believe in God, and there's the Kalam argument and the moral argument and yada yada, and the 5th and best reason, the only reason you need that renders the other 4 irrelevant, the burning in the bosom, the personal experience, the direct revelation. And Alex is like, what Bill calls the best argument, Alex is saying you'll get left out of the room.
So I've got 2 thoughts with this one. The first one is, Alex is absolutely right. He's absolutely right. That may be, and it's why we don't say, hey, we think that you're insane for thinking this, because I can't access your personal experience. That's fine. But the thing about like what he's saying with personal revelation is that a lot of the time they look for people in a vulnerable place. Right, like so we even just saw in the chat someone saying when you're low, alone, and lonely, and all of this, that's when you should pray, kind of thing. That it's sort of, that's the first thing. They target people who are desperate for meaning or some kind of epiphany, or are desperate and need some kind of purpose or something in their life. That's when you should go to God and ask for him to reveal himself. So number one is the way that when it comes to it, when you say, hey, I've asked God to show himself and he hasn't, they're like, oh, you have to do it when you're vulnerable. That's red flag number 1. Okay, that is a red flag when people want you to be in a vulnerable state in order to get this feeling. And number 2 is there is an alarming amount of people who felt this at some point in their life, have deconverted and realized that it was an ordinary feeling that wasn't tied to any God. Because we get the same evidence from people in all religions, right? Like the burning in the bosom, or the glorious beautifulness of the world coming from an Islamic person, or, all of these things. Why is God giving it to everybody, convincing them it's coming from their God? And when you actually break that down, and when you actually deconstruct it, people like me who have never believed in a God still feel this euphoric beauty of the world without believing in a God or thinking it comes from a God somehow. And people that have left religions go, yeah, I thought it was something from God. Now I experience the same thing without a God. So that sort of tells you that it's not coming from a God. It is just a human experience that people tell you is from a God when you are in an exceptionally vulnerable state. Like you've lost your job, you're really suffering, you're struggling, and they sort of say, hey, pray and worship and convince yourself, and then you'll get this feeling. And if it does happen and you suddenly notice the beauty in the world, it convinces people because they're vulnerable. They're like, well, I want to repeat this feeling, without realizing that you don't need a God to do that.
Which is really unfortunate. I mean, we can't always do it on command or anything, like knowing that it's possible without
No,
a
of
God.
course
But
not. Yeah. Well, it's more mindfulness. It's more just living your life and noticing when things are actually beautiful, or you're having, a wonderful conversation with someone, and you just allow yourself to enjoy it for what it is, or you're driving with your significant other, and you just know this is a lovely time and it feels wonderful. Just enjoy it. It doesn't last. That's the nature of these kind of moments. They don't last. And we kind of trying to force them is not a good thing. You want them to come naturally and just enjoy your life. But I feel like religion really preys upon people wanting that all the time, so they kind of sucker them into this. Oh, well, you need God to experience. You don't need God to have a good life. You do not.
yeah, I mean, they could just as easily preach something like all happiness comes from God, and so you need God or you'll never be happy. And then you meet a happy
Right.
atheist that just demolishes your religion. Or if you're unhappy in your marriage, you're like, oh, God has forsaken me. It leads to all sorts of absurdities. So they don't say that because it's obviously false. But the
Right.
things they do say are equally obviously false. So,
So, of course, and so when people ask me, what would it take? I would highly doubt that I would be reading the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology, and I'd be on objection to subheading 3 to the modal ontological argument. I don't think that one's in there actually, but maybe like the Leibnizian cosmological argument. And I go like, there, and I get out my pen, I underline it. I'm like, there he is, I found it. I don't think that's how it's going to happen.
Hiding there.
Right? Exactly. And also there's a kind of it's kind of elitism that comes along with that kind of thought, which is that if you have the time and the intellect and the studious sort of intellectual constitution and the schooling and whatnot, that you can understand this argument, and you've got the money to buy the book and the time to sit down and read it, and that's how you come to believe in God. If that's how you're supposed to come to believe in God, then that would make God a pretty unfair administrator of his love, right? And so it's clear that that's not how it's supposed to be done.
Brings to mind Matthew 11.
The Leibnizian cosmological argument, by the way, is a variant on the principle of sufficient reason, which comes from the Aristotelian tradition, where there's 4 reasons for everything, and the sufficient reason is how the thing happened. Like, you already have the raw materials, you already have like a purpose in mind. How do you execute it? That's your sufficient reason. So just figure, Alex just throwing out a specific name like that, I'm like, I bet that's a real thing, and I'm curious what it is he's referencing.
Well, I don't think Collins will understand what he's referencing either. I think that probably would go, but you get the gist of it, that there's these complicated arguments for why people should believe in God, and it really feels to atheists more like They're not for us. They're for convincing Christians that they were right that the burning bosom was right in the first place.
Oh yeah, I mean they're all derived from Aquinas's 5 reasons, which incidentally we're covering on Monday, Monday
Oh,
morning.
cool.
We do the
Yeah.
daily Deep Dives Daily is the new name.
Oh,
But
look,
every
3D slaps. I said it in the comments before.
yes.
3D absolutely slaps. Yeah, no, I like it.
But yeah, that's coming up because somebody asked about it a couple of weeks ago. I scheduled the shows a couple of weeks out, so we're going over the 5 ways. Virtually every argument, every apologetic you'll hear today is derived from at least one of the 5 ways that Aquinas put forth. So we're going to cover them. What the fuck did he say, and why are they so convincing, at least to apologists, even still today?
Yeah, I mean, the 5 ways is basically just cosmological and teleological. So cause arguments and design arguments wrapped up into 5 different things. So there's not much more to it than that. Not like a lot of them are basically the same argument, just a variation of it. I think 2 are basically the same argument about a prime mover and which is a cosmological argument, basically.
Yeah, they're very, very, very closely related. But they do come at it in different directions. But just like Leibniz's argument, because Leibniz is based on Aquinas's, but they're a posteriori, which is to say you start with there is my God specifically. Now, how can I demonstrate there must be a God, and then I'll just assume it's my God? It's really bad argumentation. But we're going to get into it. We're going to cover the arguments.
Nice.
So
Nice.
if you're into that, maybe subscribe or something. I should have been saying that this whole show because we've had people come through and leave already. But yeah, subscribe, join us. And we do stuff like that every weekday. So this is my sales pitch for it. Lots of content creators spend weeks putting together a video that goes into any real depth. Some take months, some take years. We do it daily, and we do it live. So join us.
Right.
Come for the tangents and stay for the science. I'm still polishing that one, but I think it's got a pretty good start.
Jesus' words, I thank you, or I praise you, God, that you have hidden these things from the wise and revealed them to little children. And he's talking about the awareness of faith and its reality.
Yes.
So yeah, we've been talking about things that maybe appeals to the wise. I'm not sure.
Having said that, I'm sure that God meets you where you're at, as they say. And of course, if God is everywhere and God pervades the natural world, then of course you will find him in the biological cell, and you will find him in the galaxies and the laws of the universe and whatnot.
I want to ask you that too, because again, for me, looking back when I was an atheist or an agnostic, the moments where I had those glimpses of something that made me worried that I missed out were those surprising moments of the numinous. For me, oftentimes music, the second movement of Beethoven's Third Symphony, the funeral march.
All right. So just if you don't know what noumena is your personal experience, right? So phenomena is generally what we describe as things that can be shared between people. Like, I mean, I see a tree fall, Ember sees a tree fall, that's phenomena, right? We can agree on what it was, what it happened, but there's certain things that are noumena that you cannot, like your experience of music, like how something tastes. I cannot get Ember to experience that, right? It's only internal to me. I cannot share that with Ember. So noumena is generally reserved for direct sensory experience, basically, that cannot be shared between people in some way. Now, you might say, hey, but Ember can taste the same thing. Yes, but the way it works is that noumena, because we know that, hey, some person might find that absolutely delicious, another person may absolutely hate it. It's that personal experience to you that is sort of not shared that we're talking about with noumena, rather than phenomena, which is commonly observed stuff, like, commonly as in, multiple people inter-observe stuff. People see the same thing.
Yeah, and even then, there's still some uniqueness
Oh,
to it.
yeah.
Like we've discussed before, the red receptor in my eye might be set to 670 nanometers, and Mark's might be at 665 nanometers. We'll
Right.
both see red, but the thing we experience is slightly different. Similar thing with flavors and
I'm looking at his background. He was born in Virginia, raised in a small farm. He was homeschooled, and then he attended Robert E. Lee High School. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and on the plus side, back in the day, they were much less political about things like that. Like they
Yeah,
had their
maybe.
politics for sure, like the whole we're not going to teach evolution because it's just state mandated liberal woke DEI, even though he ended up in evolution or genetics, but you need evolution to have genetics, but details. It's not so much like they do today with like cramming the 10 commandments into every textbook kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that from what I'm reading, he's had such an amazing, like he really has contributed so much to to um medicine and genetics and so just all things aside, this guy has really been a boon to science in general. So hey, hats off to him in that regard. Absolutely. um he said that by grad school he considered himself an agnostic. So I'd say he probably wasn't raised an agnostic or atheist or secular, because sort of the way that it suggests that by the time he was in grad school he considered himself a agnostic kind of thing. And he served as president of BioLogos. I got a lot of time for them. I really do. They are quite good, and I think that they do a lot of good in sort of teaching science to Christians. BioLogos is a website that is it's a Christian website dedicated to science and just science. Like it doesn't go young Earth or this nonsense about the ark or anything. It is just, hey, here is the science behind all of this.
Yeah, it's I mean this is Francis's project, and it's broadly speaking, they're like, we can talk about evolution, we can talk about the real science, but also still say there is God. And like I have mixed feelings, but it's certainly better than God commands us to take over the government and take away women's right to vote and shit,
Yep.
Definitely a
And
plus.
I really do want to underline just how much this man has contributed to our scientific understanding of genetics and biology. Like he really has done a fantastic job. So whatever else, you can't take that away from him. And this is what I mean. Like it's unfortunate that Christians are now trying to claim science as their own. Like that comes from Christians. It's only a Christian thing. You need God to do science. Absolutely not. It is a secular endeavor. You can believe in a God. And Francis Collins understands this. He knows that you cannot get God into science. You put that at the door and go, okay, I have my personal beliefs. Here's how science works. He understands that. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's something at least.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating how he's willing to he has his boundary, his barrier, and that's great. But the fact that he should have the same barrier in other areas of thought and has taken those down, it sends a message to other believers that it's okay to take those barriers down. And so there's inevitably going to be other believers who don't even try to keep science separate.
Mm.
And it shouldn't surprise them when they do.
Yeah.
That C minor, incredibly aching music that brings tears to your eyes, even though you didn't expect it. And somehow that aching longing comes into mind, and you're like, there's something here I'm supposed to be part of more often, but it's gone about as soon as you grasp it. Or something beautiful in terms of art, although it's often for me the music. Does that happen to you to get those glimpses of?
It's interesting that the things he's mentioning are all human things, like Beethoven's symphony or an art piece. Like, that stuff humans made, bestie.
Yeah.
If you're feeling a sense of the divine in things humans did, maybe it's a human thing rather than a supernatural thing, perhaps.
Well, we also find it in nature as well. You know, like there's natural things that we find breathtakingly beautiful. It's just, you know, I think it is just part of the human condition to find certain arrangements of sound or, you know, some sort of visual thing that just incredibly beautiful. Like there's something about it that is, and I'm not going into an argument from beauty kind of thing. Oh, God exists because we find things beautiful. It's just that it seems to be the human condition for whatever reason. And I think it is just there are certain sound frequencies and certain arrangements of things that just activate our brain in a certain way that, you know, is really, really beautiful to us. And that's
Oh, for
okay.
sure. Like I was mentioning earlier, the moments that I experience, they tend to be out in nature and such. It's just, to me, it's sort of telling that the references that come to Francis's mind off the top of his head are all
Right.
human made,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I mean, C.S. Lewis calls that joy. That we're surprised by joy.
Yeah.
The name of his book. Do you get those? And what do they mean?
Yeah.
The references to C.S. Lewis. I saw a comment. Someone else was referencing C.S. Lewis recently, and a comment on that video was, the moment someone references C.S. Lewis, you can just discard everything else they have to say on the subject.
Yeah, basically. I mean, C.S. Lewis has some of the worst arguments, and he's lauded up as this incredible apologist. And when you drill down to it, it really is pretty bad. He was a much better writer than he was an apologist. I'll give him that. His
Or
books
a
were,
thinker, for that matter.
yeah, his books were fine. They weren't amazing. You know, he's no J.R.R. Tolkien, you know, but they were fine. They were fine.
Yeah, well, pluses and minuses. It's a fantastical story, if not particularly creative or really imagination inspiring. It's just the concept of another world that you can get to through secret ways and things. It's very compelling. But
Yeah.
the whole Jesus myth thing and like the stupid decisions the characters make, it's crazy. But the arguments are so bad. Like, shortly after I started the channel, a lot of people came after me. They're like, "Oh, you keep going after these low-hanging fruit apologists. Why don't you take on John Lennox?" And so I took on John Lennox and found him very, very wanting because he's a mathematician and not a philosopher. "Oh, well, why don't you take on Stephen Meyer because he is a philosopher?" So I looked at what he had to say, and he gets evolution extremely wrong on purpose. So he's dishonest and transparently wrong. So, hooray. And so eventually I worked my way up the chain, and people are like, well, C.S. Lewis, he's the greatest Christian thinker in the 20th century. Sure he is. So I looked at his argument against evolution, which it's a passage from one of his books, but I wasn't going to read the whole damn book on air. I found somebody who an animation version of the thing. And it boiled down to, did the chicken come first or the egg? The fact we can never know means it must be God behind it.
Right.
I'm like, that is a fractally wrong argument.
And I mean,
that's what it was.
He was really a promoter of the moral lawgiver argument, which is just ridiculous. You know, like, oh, people share certain morals across cultures and times, therefore a God must have written them down. What? I'm sorry, what? Because, like, if you're going to point to the similarities, the differences are much, much, much more vast. So why weren't those written down by a moral lawgiver? Why weren't the Aztecs told that you shouldn't sacrifice people?
Or maybe they had the correct moral law and we're all breaking the natural law by not sacrificing.
Maybe the Old Testament is right about its moral law and we should be stoning people to death right now. Like, it's just such a bad, horrendous argument that there's some commonalities that are obvious, sort of evolutionarily speaking, why you don't, murder everybody around you. From an evolution perspective, that is basically self-exit, right? Like, it just destroys your entire civilization, your entire social structure, and condemns you to non-existence. Like, why do we need a god to give us that? We are descended from animals that did not kill each other.
Mhm. And there's a clear evolutionary selection advantage there because the animals who did kill each other didn't survive to pass on
Yeah.
their more aggressive genes because they killed each other.
So yeah, arguments like that are just absolutely terrible. I don't know if the argument from beauty, because I've heard that one before. It sounds like something C.S. Lewis may do, because here's a terrible, things are beautiful. Where do they come from if not God?
Uh-huh. Yeah, the guy who's all about smashing babies on the rocks is known for his sense of beauty.
Well, yeah, I mean that I've talked to you about this before. That is poetic language to express the feelings of the people. It's not necessarily a prescription from God.
I don't know. Believers
Yes.
today want to take it literally, even though
Well,
they're
I
being
mean,
pro-life at the same time.
you would think that a god would have some sort of, if people did write that because they were angry at being exiled into Babylon, which is why it was written, because they were incredibly angry at the Babylonians, right? Because basically the Babylonians came in, like, stomped their faces, and then they were exiled from the land into Babylon and had to stay there. You would think that a god that wouldn't approve of that would have some kind of, I don't know, editing process, so it wouldn't be put in the damn book, because apparently it was all inspired by God. Maybe he should have inspired an editor at one point.
Like, there's one chapter. I want to say it's Leviticus. It's been a while, but there's this one tribe that they pass while they're traveling through the desert that isn't nice to them, and so they're like, these people will be forsaken, and we will erase them from history. Their name will not be known to future generations, and so henceforth the name Melchizedek or whatever it is will be forgotten. I'm like, Bestie, you just wrote it down in the book, and now it's immortalized forever. Like, we've lost the whole fucking book of Jubilees, but we still have that chapter.
The ancient Israelites did not understand the Streisand effect,
right? We if we do get time travel, the Moses needs an editor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up again, because I remember earlier when you used the word longing, and I've always identified the feeling of beauty as something a bit like longing, in a way that's also okay. So I think that the word
he's touching on something there. It's unrelated to the divine question, but I have a few artist friends, and every so often someone will post something staggeringly beautiful, and the others will be like, I feel like I find it especially beautiful because it causes a sense of longing. Like, somebody will post some, like, a summer scene, like sunflowers and late nights and bonfires and all, whatever. And people will be like, oh, I'm having longing for summer now. And that is striking me as extremely beautiful. And so there's this concept that comes up periodically among these artistic people that beauty has something to do with longing or something that's lacking. Like, when you have the summer moments, you're daydreaming about the winter and the peaceful white snow and the softness and the quiet and the chill, so that you want to, like, put on a nice warm coat and have a nice warm mug of hot cocoa or something like that. We find more beautiful what we are deficient in the same way that we find more flavorful the nutrients that we're currently deficient in. Like ice cream, for example, is going to taste good no matter what. But if you're lacking in iron, broccoli will taste better than if you're currently iron saturated.
Right. Yeah, I think sugar's like a shortcut on our brain. We kind of like always think it's nice, even though we don't need that nutrient kind of thing. I think sugar is an unfortunate reaction to human brain.
We've hacked our monkey brains.
Yep.
Beauty is one of the most like promiscuous terms in the English language. I think that like we refer to a bunch of different, like categorically different things and kinds of things as beautiful. I think that music is beautiful. I think my wife is beautiful. I think that meal was beautiful. We're meaning totally different things, right? And so we have to sort of hyper focus here, right? So like with music, for example, it is an incredible mystery that you can like play some notes on a keyboard that vibrates the air in such a way as to bring out very specific emotions in a person. That's incredible. And like, yeah, I've experienced that, right? And I feel very lucky to have experienced that. With painting,
supernatural powers.
Oh,
Humans
yeah,
are
supernatural.
Well, in a way, it's almost transcendental because most art exists in a place in time so that you can perceive it, whether it's a sculpture, a painting, or whatever. But music is a different art form. Music and theater are art forms that only really exist when stretched across time. Like if you take any specific moment in a symphony, you might get some cool harmonies, but it's a note. You need to stretch it across time to experience the whole thing, you know? Hey, Squiddies! Welcome, Squiddies.
Squiddies. That's trying to remember what they were called. Yeah, Squiddies. Everyone likes Squiddies.
Yeah.
Art, it took a long time. I used to sort of not really enjoy it or get it. A lot of it had to do with contextualizing the art and learning a little bit about why it was painted, when it was painted, what the world was like, what this bit of art would have meant there and then. But now I'm a sucker for art and galleries. I think it's great. And I've tried to pay attention to like what is going on, what's happening there, right?
What does this say to you?
And I wonder. I've often felt like it's longing seems to.
Oh, these damn intellectuals. They're like, oh, I see this wonderful art piece. What does it say to me? What is it speaking to me? Why am I conceptualizing it that way? Whereas there's this whole other brand of nerd who are like, they could paint with that color in 1617, you know? Like, how did they do that? What are the brush strokes? Did they use horsehair? Like the different layers of nerdery, whether it's look at the cool thing versus what was the creator trying to convey versus how does this make me feel? It's all very different realms of intellectuality, which I suppose goes to show we were all made in God's image like cookie cutters. We're all the same. Yep.
And it's kind of funny because beauty is one of those things that philosophers constantly argue over and stuff. So I think that, you know, Alex is a philosopher. He would be happy to sit here and discuss beauty for 10 years. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure I really want to deep dive into what is beauty and is, you know,
beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. I understand now. I've had the drugs. What is it from Moulin Rouge? It's not important.
Fill the bill, at least in some of those cases, because
longing for what?
If you look at the that's the question, right? Yeah. That's the question. If you look at and this is why, by the way, I understand why people use this argument from beauty to God, because like, what is this thing that you're longing for? Well, maybe it's something like some kind of intrinsic maximum of beauty. I find that quite difficult to cognize. I find that difficult to sort of look at a painting and a bit of music and a really good pizza. I think the thing that they also have in common that's pulling me to if I sort of push those together, I sort of get a God-looking figure. Maybe though. I don't know. But I do think that if you pay attention to someone's facial expression, right? When you walk around the corner, you see a beautiful painting and someone's captured by it. What face do they look at it? Do they smile? Do they go like, oh, no, it's they sort of go, like their face is like, it almost looks, if you took a picture of the face and showed it to somebody, it looks almost like scared or it looks upset, or it looks like uncomfortable. It's sort of like
pain. That's another thing the artist group comes up with is that beauty,
Okay.
because it's a reflection of a lack, it's calling out to something that we're missing. There's an element of pain. The longing comes from pain, like when you miss your child or something, or a grandchild or whatever, something that you have a strong emotional connection with. That's the resonance in the art that calls to you, and so to have beauty, maybe there's an element of pain in it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that it's more like a symptom and there's something else that's a deeper cause. But other things that seem to have the same kind of layered connection to cause reactions are harder to pin down. It's a different discussion.
I mean, I do like art, and I do like music, some music, but not all people have the same taste in music. Some people find classical music to be boring and they don't like it, and that's fine. I'm not a huge fan of. I know that Oz does a lot of rap music and stuff, and that really speaks to him, and it doesn't me. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I have other music that I like, and that's okay. That's all right, but I think that with something like, well, beauty's evidence of a god, you would expect everybody to find the same beauty. It would be objective then. It would be something that everybody agreed on. And people don't. That's the thing. People do not agree on what is beautiful. So I have a hard time equating what people find beautiful with a god. But yeah, I mean, I've experienced that as well. I've got no reason to think that it's a god that's responsible for any of that. I don't know how, like a lot of Francis Collins stuff, I don't see him making that connection.
Yeah, that definitely seems outside the normal range of stuff that he's been expressing so far today. But I don't know. Maybe there's a poet hiding in somewhere inside him. Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, like it's sort of like it's that crunched up face.
Yeah, I want to have that. It's an ache.
So it's almost like it's almost a negative emotion. Like the feeling of beauty is almost negative rather than positive. So why is it that people love it so much? Why is it that they chase it out? And that's where I think you also get this stereotype of the.
Well, there's awe and wonder too.
Or what this is so the what is it that Rudolf Otto said, the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, the mystery that sort of fascinates you but also makes you tremble or something like that. It's this, and he's using that to describe the numinous, the holy. It's terrifying at the same time as being fascinating. You're like pulled in and pushed away at the same time. And I think if you think about the cliche of the suffering artist, the poet and the painter, and they have a terrible life, and they almost enjoy the suffering because it brings them better art. What is all of this telling us?
Yeah, the suffering brings better. That's not it. Maybe that's where that comes from, is that story. While I appreciate all of Alex's very intellectual references, I really wish he would remember that very few people are as educated as him on these specific topics. Like he went to school specifically for this, and he would just explain what the fuck he's talking about more often.
Yeah, that's a valid criticism. Yeah. If this was a debate, maybe he would be a bit more explanatory. Maybe he thinks, hey, we're just sitting down, people can look it up. Which I'm in two minds. Yes, I think he should at least give a brief overview, because I can almost guarantee that Francis Collins has no idea what he's talking about. But he's a biologist.
Maybe that's a tactic. I don't know. Maybe he's like just throwing out things and seeing, and one of the things is going to be made up, and he's waiting for Francis to nod along and go, "Yup, a great work, very profound," and he'll be like, "Haha, I made that one up."
I don't think Alex rolls like that, quite frankly. But hey.
It would be very funny if he did, though.
It's telling us that there's something about beauty which is about negativity and disconnect and suffering. And maybe it's something about feeling the suffering. If somebody suffers enough, they get the feeling that there's a way the world is supposed to be that it's not.
Yeah.
And once you realize there's a way that the world is supposed to be, that gives you teleology. And once you get that teleology, you can start expressing the desire for that end in art. But I mean, that the fact that is a negative emotion I think is interesting. That's an open question to me. By the way,
That's an interesting thought. Now, I'd never, well, I don't want to say never, but it hasn't like crossed my mind in a very long time that art may have something to do with perceiving what the world ought to be or could be and where it is. And what we might consider to be that pain that renders beauty is the difference between the actuality and the envisioned possibility. Perhaps.
Maybe.
It just there's a few other things that work the same way, right? Like we don't actually feel things, we feel changes, right? Like there's always some pressure on our skin. The atmosphere is something like 14 pounds per square inch. We feel a change in that pressure, either less pressure for, somebody puts a vacuum tube on your arm, or more pressure, someone touches you. It's the change we feel, not the absolute pressure. And it's the same sort of thing with other things. We don't necessarily feel an absolute value of happy or sad. We feel a change from our baseline. And I could see sort of another example is Kim Stanley Robinson once proposed that what we perceive as order in the universe isn't actually order. It's the difference between the maximum possible entropy and the observed actual entropy. That difference looks like order, even though it isn't, an outside force building order into the cosmos.
Right.
It could all be the same sort of thing, a perception of a gap between possibility and actuality. And if you want to go back to Aquinas, where God is the actualizing actualizer, if you want to be really philobro about it, then the fact that there is a gap means God can't be perfect. So oops, I guess. It's free will, though.
Free will.
Yeah.
I remember once I was sat, we were in Corinth, on top of this hill, sort of looking over the view of Corinth, and I said to my friend, I said, he's a Christian, and I said to him, oh, what do you make when you see like a beautiful view like this? Like what's going on in your head? Trying to understand, someone who believes in God, what do they make of beauty and stuff? And he kind of just shut me down. He turned around and said, Alex, when you analyze something, you try to take possession of it. When you enjoy something, you let it take possession of you. And I just...
Oh, poetic thought.
That's really good. Yeah.
I like that one. Now, you can do both, I must say, but still, the perspective, like the meta perspective, the perspective about your perspective on the thing you're having a perspective of, I fucking love it.
Well, that's sort of what I'm talking about with mindfulness. It's like enjoy the moment and then reflect on it. Don't try to reflect on it straight away. Like just enjoy it, is sort of what I was talking about. But I think that people that sort of enjoy it and then never think about it, that's, just go, oh, well, it was God. I find that to be, really, really, sort of sad that they never actually reflect on what makes them feel in a certain way or something. You've got no self-awareness whatsoever. Yeah,
for sure. That's another thing that comes up all the time in the human experience. Like stories, for instance. One of the things that I figured out very, very quick with my first novel is that to have a compelling story, you have to have action and then reflection and then more action and then more reflection. Because if you have nothing but reflection, nothing ever happens. If you have nothing but action, your characters never grow. There's no change. It's just stuff keeps it. And if you have a life where you have no reflection, same thing. You never fucking grow.
It's about shut me up. I was like,
that's not a bad response.
I was like, fair enough. Maybe I'm spending too much time doing the analysis. The moment you begin to ask the question, what's going on in my brain as I look at this painting, you're kind of doing the wrong thing.
Oh yeah, that's not going to help you experience the awe very much.
Yeah. So in other words, I do experience that. I don't know what to make of it. I think it would be a bit crude, as some like analytic philosophers do, to sort of say, well, this is an argument for the existence of God. But I understand what you're saying, that it seems to sort of point to something a bit sort of out there, a bit sort of newness.
If you were looking for evidence that you could experience, that God is out there and looking for a relationship with you. This feels like one of those candidates.
I think music is the best there, because paintings are tricky.
Why?
That's like the P-Town argument, which for anybody who's new and isn't aware, those of you that we haven't scared off anyway, there used to be a fellow in the community named P-Town. He was a believer, but he liked to come bother us unbelievers. He is still around. I see him pop into chats from time to time. He just doesn't bother us much anymore. His whole thing was, isn't it miraculous that the moon just happens to be the right size to just happen to cover the sun to make a total eclipse possible sometimes? Like, could that be a calling card from God? Well, maybe, but that's kind of poorly designed, since we get annular eclipses and we don't get eclipses regularly. Sometimes they only hit Antarctica, where traditionally there's not many humans. Like, what are we doing? But also, which god does it? Because, like, are we talking about Artemis, the goddess of the moon? Is that her calling card?
Or Luna, as she was known in the Roman pantheon, because they just stole their gods. And plus, like, sort of with the way perspective works, the moon isn't exactly the same size as the sun. It just isn't. It is like, it's a bit off, and perspective is going to make it look just about right, no matter what sizes. Like, it's a silly argument. It's very, very silly.
Yeah. I mean, we have supermoons and you know, the other, when we don't really make a big deal about when the moon is at its apparent minimum, but same thing.
Yeah.
The point is, you can, like, point at anything that's vaguely neat and be like, well, could that be an indicator of God? Which God, though? And why? How? Is there no coincidences in the universe? They're all proof of whatever the fuck you already believe, I guess.
Because they're human-made, and of course, like, music is human-made as well, but humans didn't make that effect. No. Humans didn't create that ability they discovered it, you know? And there's a similar way in which that's true with, like, the way that colors are beautiful and put together, but paintings are so often representations of real world objects. But music is just this thing, which also, by the way, seems completely unnecessary. It seems that, like, there's no reason why we would need, as, like, evolved creatures, to develop this faculty for beauty.
There is, and there's
for music.
Well, it's a mathematical effect. We could get into the details. This is why Pythagoras had a cult, because he figured out, he was big into mathematics. He also used mathematics to figure out why people find music so compelling, and he found it. There's harmonics, there's resonances, there's every note is either double or half of the frequency of the next note.
Right.
He found that relationship, and it's a whole story. It's a fascinating story, but it's a big, long, involved story. But you know, the reason music is music is it's the same as every other thing humans have developed. We screwed around with things until we found something that worked, and then we developed that. We said, oh, this is useful. Let's do more with this, you know?
Yes. And it seems like we have evolved for some frequencies. Like, for instance, why do nails down a chalkboard make so many people uncomfortable? Like, a study was saying that, hey, it is very close to the frequency of a crying child. And humans seem to have a reaction to a crying child that they want to stop the crying, right? Like, and there's an advantage for that, right? Because if you're going to address the crying, it helps the child's survival, right? Like, we want to try to fix that problem, whatever it is. So the reason why certain frequencies make us feel really uncomfortable is because we can't do anything about them. You know, we can't address nails down a chalkboard. It's frustrating as hell. Now, I don't know if that's for sure. I just remember reading something about it, but there's certain frequencies that are terrible. Why is that? We don't know.
It could be functionally related, or it could be something else that we don't even understand yet. It's a c'est la vie. But yeah, Pythagoras figured out the magical secrets of why music is compelling and how to refine it and make better music. And on top of that, that there's a link to the divine because of the fact that works. And boom,
Right.
cult.
Mm-hmm.
Brain now that responds to music differently than it does to speech, which means it's there for a reason. It's evolved really to recognize musical tones. There's a circuit that recognizes pitch. There's one that recognizes intervals between the preceding note and the note you just heard. And most interestingly, there's a circuit that predicts the next note.
But do you think there's a survival benefit
There must be.
but in like not just being able to tell different pitches apart and stuff, but like of the ability to enjoy music?
Enjoy and
Yeah, that's the critical question, because we can see survival advantages of being able to hear certain pitches. If we're hunting things, we want to be able to hear them. Or bird calls, for instance. Maybe we're hunting birds, maybe we're not. Maybe we're using bird calls to coordinate with other members of our hunting party, whatever the case may be. But this whole thing of identifying pitch, interval, and even prediction, that one may or may not be innate. Maybe it's, there's certain birds that make certain patterns. Like there's mourning doves around my area. They sing their song a certain way. I used to whistle to them in the mornings because I could do the first two notes and then they'd finish. It was pretty fun. But it's the same pattern every time. Once you hear it a few dozen times, you expect it. And other birds with their calls, you develop this sense of anticipation. And we use this in our musical development. Like I had a music teacher once tell me that so calls out for do. If you're writing music and you hit a so, the next note has to be either lower do or higher do, but it has to be do. If you don't go from so to do, it will strike the ears of the listener as wrong. And it's not for any objective reason. It's just the way we're conditioned to expect the next note based on previous experience with every other piece of music ever written.
Well, there's some interesting stuff. I remember reading this thing about, have you ever heard of a honey guide in Africa? It's a type of bird, and it's got a unique call for humans, right? Because they're really good at finding honey, like bees' nests, right? They're really good at finding bees' nests, like incredibly good. But this bird is tiny. It's only this tiny little bird, and it could be easily stung to death by bees. So it produces a call, a really unique, distinct call for humans. And these human hunters will hear the call and know that it's found a nest, and they will go over. And humans are really good at breaking into bees' nests because we've got tools and stuff, right? We've got sticks and rocks and things. So they'll break into the bee's nest, and they will give some of the honey to the honey guide. And so it's a symbiotic relationship between the bird and human. But the question is, did we domesticate the honey seeker or the honey guide, or did the honey guide domesticate humans is the question. Because it's the one that calls to us. Like, we don't call it over. It calls humans over. But really fascinating stuff. Like, apparently its call for humans is unique to different areas and tribes. And it basically has this unique call that only humans respond to, and only when it's found a hive of bees.
That's incredible, because it makes me think of once you teach a dog its name, it'll respond to its name. It's like it's saying, here, humans, and the humans fucking appear. It's like summoning your pet in a video game. Here come the humans to break open the bee's nest. I don't know, that strikes me as extremely funny. It's really cool, though.
Draw others together with you, mothers singing lullabies to their babies before maybe they even could speak in a language, people getting together to mourn a disastrous situation or a loved one, or getting together to sing a fight song.
Well, okay, maybe there is a reductionistic evolutionary explanation. I don't know. Maybe we should swap seats.
That's another possibility with music too. Is like, humans saying the same thing together, whether it's a chant or a song or an anthem, it gives this sense of unity and community, and it reinforces the impact of the message. So that's not necessarily music, but it's certainly a start on a chorus.
Yeah.
It's on there, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have the same significance for us, just as I don't think the fact that we can talk about these things means that they are less likely to be important to God. Our brains are intended to provide the substance by which we can achieve revelations that we wouldn't have been able to do.
Yeah, I do wish I had a bit more interesting to say about, from like an atheist side, about the beauty stuff. I think the only way to do that would just to offer some kind of like reductionistic account of why the human brain has evolved to sort of be able to tell pictures apart, and some of them are more pleasing and others, and then we've like co-opted that to create, you know, artificially stimulating things with like piano.
Well, it's not a great argument either way, because first of all, it shouldn't be an argument. It's an observation, and then we're saying, well, which worldview explains it? But while Alex can like come up with like specific avenues of explanatory power, it exists because of this, for this reason, or maybe it's because of this, or maybe it's all these different things altogether. What does Francis actually have? Right. God put it there. Cool. Why? We're at the same stage of the discussion. Why is it there evolutionarily? Right. Why is there? Because God put it there.
Yeah.
Why is it there?
And how do you know that? Like, it seems like, you know, our friend in chat who's doing this massive word salad about time and infinity and God, you're just begging the question that it's God. You're just saying, hey, the God exists. We see this thing. That's because of the God I assume that exists. What you're not doing is looking around, finding it, and then finding the cause for it. You're begging the question first. You're basically putting the God up front and then looking around for things to confirm that that God is there. So Francis Collins has put up the God, seen beauty, and gone, well, that comes from God. It's an ass backwards way of doing things. Yeah, it's completely backward.
And guitars, and I'm sure we could do that, but like you say, let's not waste time. I think most people probably are aware that that kind of argument could be made. It's still a wonderful mystery, isn't it? Yeah. And I think that the key thing here throughout all of this is that, like, I'm not convinced by fine-tuning that it's like a good reason to believe in God, but it's a great mystery. The Christian isn't convinced by suffering that there is no God and that this undermines everything, but it is a great and terrible mystery. You know, the beauty is a great and perhaps terrible mystery as well. The resurrection.
Well, I think Alex may be misframing the argument, and we run into this, especially when you get into a whole bunch of different intellectual stuff all on the table at the same time, because they're all different flavors in different directions and whatnot. But we're not looking at the atheist sees the world this way and the believer sees the world this way. It's one atheist sees the world this way and a Christian sees the world this way. But a Muslim will see the world this way, and a Buddhist will see the world this way. And even if the atheist were to say, one of you is probably right, how am I to tell which? Therein lies the problem. It's not, should I believe something? It's, why should I believe you? You know?
Yeah. Why can't we just say we don't know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a strange moment in history, like what happened on Easter morning. It's all an incredible mystery. And I think anybody who professes confidence in the knowledge of any of these things is either like a really, really talented physicist who actually just does know a ton about fine-tuning and can probably like school both of us, fine. But when it comes to those sort of big consequential questions about the existence of God and stuff like that, and what beauty really means, man. Like if somebody professes that kind of confidence on questions like that, then I immediately treat them with suspicion. Maybe that's one of my priors.
We've covered a lot of ground today. The last question I wanted to give both of you, because you're coming from different perspectives, but why do you feel like this question matters that we've been exploring in this entire conversation? Like, you clearly explore these realms on your own podcast constantly, and you've
now, as a reminder, because we are in part 3, the question he's referring to is, does God exist?
Yeah.
That's what they've been trying to talk around this entire time.
I would answer this by sort of saying it's because, like, if a God exists, there's a whole load of entailments that comes with that. Like, for instance, a objective morality that needs to be followed. There is entailments for an afterlife, of course, and there is entailments. There's simply, why it's important is because there are a whole bunch of actions based upon beliefs that people do, based upon the belief that this is true, right? They advocate for certain things in politics. They treat people in a certain way because the person is a member of their religion or not. These institutions are founded on it. Beliefs are important because they have very real world consequences, right? So, in Queensland, for instance, there was a young girl, just a child with who needed who had diabetes and needed insulin, and they basically thought that their faith could substitute for medicine. And so belief in something can have very real world consequences, and in that case the girl died. So I think it's an important question because there are actions being taken on the belief that it is true that can lead to dire consequences. And just look at the US's state under Project 2025 at the moment. It is a complete disaster, and it will never be accepted, but people believe that they have a divine authority to do this. If this was just a personal belief, and people like Francis Collins did science and had a personal belief and just went to church and helped the community and stuff, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But that is not what is happening in our world. I'm sorry, it's not. And even if you say, well, why Christianity? Because that's the most prevalent one in my society. I am also concerned about those. You might as well say to a Christian, like, why do you worry about Islam? If it, why do you care if Allah exists? Why is it an important question to show that Allah? It's because the beliefs that some of those people have dire real world consequences. And they easily understand that, but never understand that about their own religion. And that's what baffles me. They'll go, oh yes, some of them do horrible things. They, extremists and all that. Okay, do you think you don't have extremists in your own religion?
Yeah, well, if they're doing it for my God, then it's justified.
Yeah.
Or something. It's, yeah, as you put it, it's baffling. But yeah, it's an important question because it guides what people do. What people's belief guides their actions, how they vote, who they support, who they'll be friends with. In some cases, like Jehovah's Witnesses, you're not allowed to be friends with someone who isn't a Jehovah's Witness, If a family member leaves the church, you're supposed to shun them. Yeah, it affects people's lives.
Dedicate your whole life after coming to faith.
It's the most important question. Is there a God? I defy anybody to come up with one that matters more than that. I don't want to go all the way to past.
I mean, for me, literally anything else. I care about the question because of the real world implications of what the believers do. If there were a God, I would very much like to know. I would like to know about it, what it wants, why, whatever its powers are, what it's doing, and whether I want to help or interfere or whatever. Maybe it really did create all of everything and it just wants to be thanked for creating a universe for us where we can live. Then great. I'd like to know so I can offer it thanks, whatever the case may be. But as far as, I mean, saying we need to know if the great universal tooth fairy exists is the most important question. Well, until there's like a real reason why, I dare say, like, where our next meal is coming from is slightly more important,
Yeah.
And the arrogance of it just infuriates me. The thing I believe in specifically is the most important question. I can't think of one more important. Really? You can't? My goodness.
Pascal's wager, but if there is a God and God cares about me, and I'm ignoring that, that feels like a really bad way to live your life, much less whatever comes after. If there isn't a God and I'm wasting my time by worshiping something that's not there, that's a really bad outcome too. This is a really important question. And yet I think until I was 25 years old and one of my patients lying in a bed suffering from terrible heart disease asked me, "What do you believe, doctor?" I had paid no attention to that question. And I didn't like it, but it was the right question. It's still the right question. I have my own answer.
In his defense, at least he didn't go for Pascal's wager. At least he didn't do that, because he said, like, if there is no God and I'm wasting my life, then that's significant as well. Usually they're like, well, I've lost nothing if I've just, wasted my life. The Pascal wager kind of stuff, which is a terrible argument.
Yeah. And at least he has the seed of I could be wrong, and here's one of the potential consequences. So, but I guess on the other hand, like the fact that he's even sitting down with Alex O'Connor, he is at least able to intellectualize, if not emotionally engage with the possibility of he could be wrong.
A different one, but we're both on a road, and it's hard to know exactly what that road will lead us to.
Yeah. I think Christopher Hitchens once said that the road to Damascus is not a one-way street. So we don't know which way we're traveling necessarily, but you're quite right that we're on that road. I think that it is an interesting question at sort of first crude analysis. Like it's this interesting, think of this question of God's existence. You sit down at the pub with somebody and you're talking about God, and you could go anywhere with this person. If I meet a Christian in a pub and say, "Why do you believe in God?" I might be about to talk about physics. I might be about to talk about beauty and poetry or history or biblical scholarship. There's so much contained in this world of discussion that even if you're just interested in science, or you're just interested in ethics, or you're just interested in history, this like God question just allows you to explore all of that. So it's interesting. What does it look?
Everything except the God part. And that's the thing. We can discuss all of these things without having to fuck around with this God business.
Yep.
They're all, and in fact, we can get a lot deeper on the topics if we're not hiding it behind the veil of, oh, well, isn't God great for making that for it? It's frustrating to me.
Lewis said about I don't know if he was talking about the resurrection particularly or about Christianity, that it's either the most important truth in the world, or if it's not true, then it's like trivially false. The one thing it can't be is
uninteresting or
is sort of important. It's either the most interesting or the least interesting question in the world. It can't be kind of important. And so why is this important? Well, if God exists, as Dr. Collins says, it is the most important question that exists. If God doesn't exist and all of this is fabricated or mistaken, then more important questions would include things like, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? And
where's my next meal coming from? I'm a psychic, folks. Send tributes.
Yeah. Yep. How did you know?
I know. I have foreseen what was coming next in this year-old video. I didn't watch ahead, though.
What's your favorite song, right? Because if it's untrue, whatever, it's sort of inconsequential. But in that sort of Pascalian spirit, as long as there is that possibility of that truth, the sort of infinitude of utility that comes from that makes it probably worth exploring even for an atheist.
Beautiful. No.
Totally agree.
Well, thank you guys for being here.
It's good to end on a point of agreement, isn't
it?
Yes, it is.
Hell yeah. They agreed. Yay.
Yay. We have agreement. That's awesome.
That is awesome. Pretty rare for the stuff we covered. That's true.
Yeah. I think that, Alex is very sort of, I think outside debates, he's very accommodating and very sort of agreeable. And I do like his style. Like he doesn't sort of, ram it down people's throats or try to use, philosophical concepts against people. He doesn't talk outside of their range of knowledge usually. He might have dropped a couple of authors and arguments there, but you sort of got the gist of what he was saying. And you're right, he probably should have explained them better. I do acknowledge that criticism. That is true. But he's obviously not trying to prove him wrong. And I think there can be a lot learned from that. For me, Collins he really was just non sequitur central. Like, yes, he's got the idea of a God, and yes, he's got the idea of a beauty or emotion or music or all of this kind of stuff, but there's nothing linking them together. He's missing that vital link which says, this is how we know that this comes from a God, right? Like he's just saying, hey, there's something we don't understand where it comes from. I have an idea of God. One must come from the other. And it's like, well, why? Especially as, and then sort of says, well, your priors are important. Yes, but if your prior is God exists, that's basically presuppositionalism. That's basically saying, well, I'm right because God exists. Well, how do you know God exists? Because he exists. And then you get into circular arguments. You're deep into circularity, where the only reason you're linking the two is because you've already presupposed that a God does exist. And it's that chain of epistemology from one to the other that really you need to have to show that one comes from the other, to say that that does exist, right? Like you can't just go, well, there's a thing I suppose, there's another thing where we don't know where it comes from. Oh, well, it's logical just to have the two. Because people were doing that back in the day with lightning bolts, right? Like lightning bolts occur, that there's this effect that we see, there's a phenomenon that we see, there's this energy comes down from the sky. I have an idea of Zeus. Well, obviously it's Zeus throwing lightning bolts, right? This is the problem with that thinking. Whereas now we know it doesn't have anything to do with Zeus. It is purely ions and in the atmosphere, and the generation of static electricity in the atmosphere leading to a release and a grounding of that energy. Like there is nothing supernatural about it. But this is where that gets you to. If you can't actually link the two together, you end up believing that Zeus is throwing lightning bolts. And just because, but nobody believes in Zeus anymore, and it's just like, well, yeah, but you're doing the same thing with music or beauty or emotions or conscience, right? Like your conscience to tell you this is right and wrong, or quantum physics, right? Like if you're appealing to God, you've got to actually link the two, not just say, hey, there's a quantum effect, we don't really understand it, it's God.
Well, you see, the fact that the universe is fine-tuned for lightning bolts is proof of Zeus.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yep. Yep. That's probably
the fact,
true.
The world, our very atmosphere is fine-tuned to make music in the way we experience it possible is proof of Pan.
Right.
We're going to have all these gods fight each other out for credit for who's responsible, who gets humanity as their worshippers, I guess, is the prize.
So interestingly enough, I think that the Greek gods are actually logically more likely, because they're not all good. They're not all they don't have the problem of evil that the Christian God does, because the Christian God allows evil even though he's supposed to be omnibenevolent or all good. So there's a problem there that theists have a hard time addressing. But somebody like Zeus, who not only does he not care about humans doing evil or, evil things happening, he also does evil things himself. Like he's accosted women and stuff like that, like really terrible stuff.
Cheats on Hera constantly, whether his other partner consents or not. Adventures and things. I don't know. I don't think I can agree with either Alex and Francis about whether the question is even necessary or even necessarily important. Because the thing of it is, even if we could demonstrate that specific God does not exist, and we kind of can in several different ways, it wouldn't actually change the behavior of believers, because they can still be Christians. And it's not even necessarily being Christian that dictates certain behaviors, because we have people who are Christians who are very caring and loving and give to the poor and try to, you know, help the homeless and such. And then we've got other Christians that try to drive everybody who isn't a blonde-eyed, blue-haired person out of the country.
Yes.
So what does being Christian even mean in that context, you know?
I don't know. And to me, they are all Christian. It's like saying, you know, if Muslims are saying, hey, we want communities and we want to have you know, we don't believe in Sharia law and we have stability and, you know, we have all these things. You know, how do you decide who's the real Muslim from the extremist that wants to, you know, have a jihad on Western society and blow people up and do horrendous things? To you, which ones are Muslims? Well, they're all Muslims, just like the bad Christians are Christians. You have to wear that stuff. And for atheists, it's like, yeah, Stalin was an atheist. Absolutely, he was. Yes. Like, we don't, you know, you can't just say, hey, that's not part of my group because I don't like their behavior. Like, that's not how this works. But I can still condemn atheists that have done the wrong thing. They're still horrible people. But this whole thing of, well, they're not real Christians because, you know, I don't know what it is about religion that makes it so you have a blind spot for people following your religion doing the wrong thing and say, hey, they're not really fill in the blank, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just condemn the badness. Like
Yeah.
as your God calls you to. There's whole chapters saying you must purge the wicked from among you. But what do I
thought
know?
so. Maybe they're not like sort of, so when everything's up for interpretation, maybe they're not, you know, they didn't interpret that correctly. Maybe that's not thing. But I think Alex has done a real good job of not being a dick to Christians, you know, just to have a conversation with them and explain why you don't believe in it, kind of thing. He's done a really good job. I do. And look, Francis Collins, he's still a great scientist. He really is. There is no taking that away from him. Like, you cannot argue that, you know, Christians have contributed to society. They have. But the question is, when does that become cover for people who are absolutely destroying any progress in our society and any chance of having an equitable society? You know, like, when does that become a real problem? I think that in some ways the atheist movement has provided cover for some of these monsters as well. You know, Lawrence Krauss springs to mind, and Richard Dawkins springs to mind. Like, I can't take away from their scientific endeavors, but they're gross. They're horrible people. They're awful.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And we
like
condemn
Lawrence
people on
Krauss
moral
especially.
grounds.
Yeah.
On ethical grounds, not my magic book says their behavior is in keeping with proper worship or what the fuck ever. Not
Right.
No, they did bad things.
Yes.
It's really
We can
that
just
simple.
Yeah, we can just look at the consequences of their behavior, and that's all we need to look at. What consequences when their behavior is applied to society and stuff. And, you know, Lawrence, he is just awful, just an awful man, awful. And but he's still an atheist. I don't have to say, oh, but he's not a real atheist. He's definitely not a secular humanist. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know if he ever claimed to be one, but he's definitely not.
He may have. But it's not important because, like, the values, not even the worship, the devotion, that's an issue with religion, is it puts the devotion and the claim to worship above the values that the religion claims to express. The values go out the window as long as you continue to praise Jesus's name. If it were the other way, with you show your devotion by adherence to the values, then we'd have some more in common, because you express that you're a humanist not by any particular worship, but by adherence to the values that make you a humanist. If you stop following the values, you're not behaving as a humanist.
Yes, but he was given Humanist of the Year in 2015. The American Humanist Association gave him an award in 2015.
Yeah, Dawkins
and
got one of those
argues
too in like 2003 or something, but they rescinded
that
it because he
hu-
did very non-humanist things.
did they rescind? Did he rescind? Did they rescind Krause's?
I do not know. I only know about Dawkins because he whines about it constantly.
Okay.
I'd imagine Krauss would have, since he literally wrote a book about how canceled he is and then went on a national tour to sell the book because he's so canceled. But whatever. Yeah, all these I've been canceled guys, they love to tell you how canceled they are. But that doesn't mean that Krauss necessarily had that happen, because it may not be because it doesn't make his ego seem bigger. Maybe he wouldn't talk about that. Krauss Award I can't even spell rescinded. Let's see if anything comes up. Yes, in October 2018, they revoked his 2015 Humanist of the Year award following allegations of sexual misconduct. So his went away real quick.
Yes, and should have. But you know, does humanism provide a cover for people like this piece of shit? It may do.
Hopefully
You know,
not.
there are some people out there claiming to be humanists that are treating women bad, and guess what? Women are humans, people. They are humans. Like, you can't be a humanist and go, well, I'm gonna treat women like a second class people. Like, they're human. Ugh.
Yeah, we're biological too, as it turns out. All the women are biological, all the men are biological. I mean, our friend AJ is like half cyborg, but she's still biological.
Yeah. You know, I wonder where cyborg like lies. You know, like you know, if you have a hearing aid, are you a cyborg? If you have a false teeth, are you a cyborg? Like, where does the line be drawn? Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, where is the line drawn? If you've got a fake eye, are you a cyborg? You know, like, I really wonder. You know, if you've got pins to keep your bones together, are you a cyborg? Like, what level of technology do you need to become a cyborg? I'm wondering. Asking for a friend.
I used to I used to wear glasses, and I because it was fun, I considered myself a cyborg because I was a technologically augmented human being. But I think if you want to get like into the hair splitting of it, as it were, where the line is, I think it would have to be like implants with like electronics. Like, it has to have both of those things.
Well, isn't a cochlear implant both of those things?
Yes. AJ, you're a cyborg.
Cyborg. Cyborg.
But that's just my definition. I could be
and I,
swayed.
for one, welcome our new cyborg overlords.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a transhumanist, but I can definitely see advantages. Like, people start talking about like, oh, you'll have like phone and all these gadgets like implanted. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. It's too like upgrading. You know, see how many times people upgrade their iPhone? Imagine if you had to do surgery to do that. That is so inconvenient. So I don't think unless medical tech advances exponentially in the next few years, I don't think we're right around the corner from that kind of thing.
Yeah. Could be neat though. Eyeballs that like can zoom in.
Oh yeah.
Where we could see a wider range of colors. Oh my goodness. If I could just see infrared by like flipping a switch inside my electronic eyeball, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Or just be able to zoom in to the road ahead of you and like see perfectly everything. That would be cool. Yeah. Anyway, what did you think of the loosely termed debate, Ems?
It was fascinating. I mean, I think the arguments were shit, but
Yeah.
the weird random stuff we got to cover, like Alex said, it is actually compelling. Like, you do get a
Yes.
wide range of topics, and there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
Yeah, I felt, you know, Colin's reasoning was incredibly lacking, and really it came down to that he had an experience that made him feel very strongly, and that convinced him. And it seems like that's his prior, that all of these things flow onwards. Like, you know, it shouts design, and I think it shouts design because of his prior, that God created everything. And so I really think that all of it, when you drill down to it, it really is, well, I felt good at this point in a way that I cannot explain, and seems unexplainable, ineffable, if you will. And that seems to be my evidence of God. And look, I can't dispute it. I haven't had that experience, but at the same time, yeah, it does nothing to convince me, and I do think there is no God.
I mean, I think it's broadly true that unless the ancient Greeks are right and Zeus exists, or your name is Mary and you're unmarried, then God is ineffable.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Yeah.
I've been
No,
in a
no, that's
loopy mood
fine. I
this
get
whole
you.
time.
It should be uneffable then. Uneffable,
Yes.
not ineffable. Yeah, uneffable. Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for this time, folks. Thank you all so much for joining us. We finished another one.
Yay!
We've got a bunch of these damn things. There's a whole playlist, in fact. If you want more of this
yeah.
stuff, there's a
Yeah.
playlist. Check it out. And
Mhm.
remember to subscribe to Mark's channel too, Mark Reed Atheism, linked in the description, because next week we'll be back over at his place for a fresh new debate. But subscribe here
Yes.
too, because I have other stuff going on as well. And if you want more Bible discussions, this show will take you over to friend of the community, Dr. Kip Davis, where he's
Cool.
doing something with some weasels that has Bible things involved. I don't know what the hell they do on
Budget
Saturdays.
Scripture
But...
Saturday. Olympic hockey eve drinking. Okay. All right. So apparently the hockey's starting in the Winter Olympics, and they're celebrating the fact, which is a very Canadian thing to say. Apparently there was a curling fight in Canada. Like, people were getting angry about someone cheating in curling. I've never heard anything like it. It's wow.
It's pretty wild. But
Yeah.
whatever the hell they're up to, you know, Dr. Kip does love the Bible. So I'm sure you'll hear more.
No, that's not true. He fucking loves the Bible. You have to get these things right.
Okay, I stand correct. Well, I sit corrected.
Yeah, fair enough.
Alrighty, folks. Thank you all so much for joining. Mark, as always, it's been a trip. We will see you guys again very, very soon. And shit, I was gonna steal someone else's outro, but I can't remember the outro. You know what? It's not that important.
Still mine.
Oh, yeah, sure. Be kind to each other, be kind to yourselves, and we'll see you in the next one. Doodles. Thanks to all our patrons and top-level members for January. Miranda, Karen Butcher, Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist, Robin Webster, Maya Adkison, Jimmy Tux, Ian Chen, Lilith, Ember Lynn, The Barely Bearable Atheist, Eric Wander, Jason Jacoby, Lil of All Trades, Deviant Outcast, Secular Feelinist, Kelly King, the Detroit Atheist Queen, Geo Sam, Thriver Scapegoat, The Godless Engineer, Why Because Weed Bro, and Katie Bluebird. And you can add your name here next month by signing up at patreon.com/betterthanember, or by joining Emberships here on YouTube at the Cinder level, which also includes all the custom emojis, tons of member-exclusive content, member-only live streams, and a bunch of other stuff. I deeply appreciate all the supporters who keep this channel going. Thank you so much. Because of you, we're building a wonderful community that I'm very proud of.
We're lighting Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now.